Okay. Welcome to everyone online and everyone in the audience. The July 24, 24 Flathead Reservation Water Management Board meeting. As usual, we start with an opening prayer. So, George, would you like to give us a prayer today, please?
Okay. Great. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing us all to be here today. Help us to make wise decisions as we consider our options before us. Please protect all of us, guide us, help us all to lead a good life. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, George. Okay, meeting minutes, as always, are on the Flathead Reservation Water Management Board.gov website. If you need to see minutes from previous meetings. After having looked at the agenda, are there any potential conflicts of interest? George?
No.
Ken?
No.
Roger?
No.
Georgia?
No.
Okay. None for me. Thank you. And attendance, please. Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
And absent today, Shane. Thank you. So we want to adopt an agenda, but I think there's some thoughts about possibly making a little bit of a change to it here. So Roger?
Yeah, I have a suggestion, maybe. Because I think item number 7 should be item number 4. I think that's been pretty well vetted, and I think we can proceed through that fairly rapidly. And then I'd like to move item number 6, the water engineer's report, to number 5. And then just flip-flop to number 5 to number 6 for the WPNP Flathead System Compact Water. And then finally, number 4, WPNP post public comments, to make number 4 number 7. And then I had a question if there's some redundancy on here, because under board business 3.2 is discussion of budget, but yet under 6.1 it's budget extravaganza. Is that?
You know, after the original draft came out, I think I made a comment to make sure we had the budget, and that was probably before I actually noticed it was already on there. So we can have it in one spot or the other. It doesn't matter to me. I don't think we need it both. No.
Yeah, that's what I was
That would be
thinking
my
too.
thought. Where would you like
So
to have it? Keep it under
5 is good.
number
probably.
5.
Yeah, the new 5,
The new
water
5.
engineer report.
So where it says 3.2, we would just scratch that.
Right.
Okay. Those are Roger's suggestions. Any other suggestions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Could we add 2 items under the water engineer report? Item 6.5. Employee retirement eligibility start date. And should be a brief discussion, Mr. Chairman. And then item 6.6, we have just a letter that we're about to send out. We wanted to let you know, give you an update. It's a notice of approaching deadline for some of the water right applications that we have. We just want to let you know what our plans are, give you a quick update.
Any objection to adding those items?
Well, I sort of do, because, and that's a procedural thing. And I have another procedural thing that'll come up later. But usually if these things aren't put out in public notice, then the public's not aware of them. And so then if somebody from the public wanted to comment on them, they wouldn't know they're on the agenda.
Okay. But that's true when we're adding things. Is there any legal reason we can't add it?
There can be a discussion of it, But then there should be another discussion at the next meeting and it should be noticed on the next agenda as well.
Okay, so that's an option. So Roger,
So I don't think we could make a decision, but I guess if we want to have a discussion,
for
that's
discussion
fine.
on both of
Yeah.
those.
Sure.
Correct, there can be no board action on it, yes.
Any other comments on those two items?
For what it's worth, I think they're just ministerial items, so they wouldn't be something that would need to go to like a public comment.
Okay, well, we'll have the discussion, and if we do need to include them in next month or next meeting for action on the agenda, we can do that. Okay.
Okay.
All right, any other comments, questions, changes? You good with those changes? You good? Georgia?
Yes.
Okay, so we have items 1 through 3 unchanged, except for 3.2, we're scratching. 4 becomes 7, 5 becomes 6, 6 becomes 5, and 7 becomes 4. And we're adding for discussion a 6.5 and a 6.6, which actually become 5.5 if I can. 5.6. And with that, if you're ready, take a motion to approve the agenda
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
with changes.
Thank you. Yes.
Motion by George. Second by Ken, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we have our agenda. Thank you. Okay, public comment for items not on the agenda. So anybody in the audience who has a public comment, now would be a good time. We'll have another public comment later. You do, you have to step up. Anybody online?
If anyone online would like to make a public comment, you can do so now by raising your hand and online to speak. Having no one online right now.
With that, we have no public comment at this time. So moving forward. Board business. Adoption of meeting minutes of 7/10/24. Comments, questions, suggestions on the July 10 meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion. We approve the minutes as provided.
Motion by Roger,
Second.
second by George. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we're approved. Thank you. So jumping to the new number 4. Water policy procedures
I thought that
Working session.
had the good development.
Ethan Haley.
Yes.
All right, so I thank you to those who submitted comments or questions for this session of the WPMP. I tried my best to incorporate everybody's comments, questions. Obviously, if anything comes up, feel free to stop, ask questions. I know, Roger, I think you have one like right out the gate. Did you want to ask that one first so we can go with that?
Sure, I reviewed this too. I thought it was a great job. I really didn't have any comments. The only question I had, first paragraph, last word, designee, what? Does that need a definition?
So the designation is actually fine in the ordinance.
Okay.
It is essentially a hearing examiner or someone who can be appointed as a hearing examiner outside of just the engineer.
That particular element, I kind of picking through this. I figured that, but in reading through the section, initially it was a little unclear because there was an element in there where it talks about a recommendation for a decision, but it didn't really say who the recommendation was coming from, and I think I might have made that comment as well.
Mhm. And to clarify that, so, I think we've gone over the flow chart before, but it's been a while. So just as a refresher, the office of the engineer will receive an application. They'll have time to review it. Different applications have different timing requirements. And what they will do is they'll do their own research, do their own review. And the engineer or the designee will draft what's called a recommended decision. Typically, that's gonna look like, and we've shown some examples of these, but typically what we're looking at is a findings of fact, conclusions of law. For that.
Okay, hit pause right there.
Yeah.
So that was maybe where I was getting hung up, because if the recommendation is actually coming from the engineer, the appeals actually then go back to the engineer, original appeal. So how does that work?
So we had conversations about this with Ethan and James back in February. And by we, I mean John and myself.
Yeah.
This is where we met with them in Missoula and had a conversation about this entire process and what their envisions were of this. So to keep things balanced and impartial, we came up with the idea of whoever drafts the recommended decision will not be a part of the final determination of the office of the engineer. So if the designee drafts the recommended decision, then the engineer will sit for the hearing
Okay, and vice
and
versa.
vice versa.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you are paying attention to that, because it is actually kind of substantial different operational parameter for our office, in that when you look at the cross-referencing of job titles, and you see for our office, like a water resource specialist, as compared to what you see, there's no part of the water resource specialist should have here in our office, we're gonna have to do something. And,
Right.
you know, we are gonna have to designate people other than me, to make decisions, to actually issue.
Make recommendations.
Decision, especially if I'm gonna need to be the person that acts as the hearing examiner for the office, that, you know, that's gonna be complex. We'll try to work internally to figure out what works best. And, although a hearing examiner is not allowed to influence the decision, we have had a lot of back and forth about how the hearing examiner can offer substantive format and procedural, advising towards the development of a recommended decision, the facts, the conclusion of law. Similar in nature to how Haley can help me with things up to a point on the procedural bits of it, but then ultimately the decision, that she'll need to stay away from will be mine, past that procedural assistance. And that's a lot of what the training that James and I went to was about. And I think it ultimately is probably something to talk about in our budgeting, because of the responsibility that we're seeing on several positions in this office are more than just helping to process an application. We're actually
So, Chairman.
Yes.
Spent 30 years doing administrative law. And in administrative law, you need a final agency action. And I just don't see how a recommendation is a final agency action.
It's not.
Then how can we feel it?
This is where it gets confusing, and I had to like go over this with these guys too. The appeal in the hearings, like the office of the engineer, is not a true appeal. All it is you're taking the recommended decision and you're challenging that recommended decision, and you're bringing it before the hearings examiner, who is typically going to be the engineer.
Could you call it something different, like objection or something?
No, because an objection is a completely separate process that's spelled out in the ordinance.
Contest.
Potentially, this is how it is actually drafted in the ordinance, is this process. It's the appeal to the engineer or designee of the recommended decision.
It says that in the ordinance.
It does.
An appeal
It does.
recommendation. Okay, stand corrected.
Yeah, no, it's a really wonky way to write it, because I agree, I would think appeal has to be from a final decision as well. But it's not an appeal in the true sense of an appeal to a different body. So it's not in the sense of where, let's say the engineer drafts the final decision, and let's say an objector says, hey, I'm gonna appeal that decision of the engineer to the board. So that's going from the office of the engineer and escalating it to the board. That's a true appeal.
Would it,
I took final agency action all the way to the circuit and lost it.
would it be at all helpful to consider something in the language that says appeal to the recommendation, even though we know that's what it is, but if it says appeal to the recommendation.
Sure, I mean, we could put, appeal of the
Appeal of the
recommended decision.
recommended,
Yeah,
yeah,
and
I'm just-
I wanna make sure we're being consistent with
Yeah.
how we title these
Yeah.
things, because recommended decision is the phrase that's used in the ordinance
Sure.
for that type of findings of fact, conclusions of law. So I wanna make sure we're being
I'm
consistent.
just throwing that out. Would that make any difference to you? And if it was worded
Well,
differently?
it's in the ordinance, I mean, I really don't have a object to the ordinance, using crazy language, okay.
And that is something that like perhaps we could spell out in these procedures, is that the recommended decision is not a final agency action.
There we go,
So
Okay.
we could clarify it that way.
okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Why
would
don't
it,
we just put
would
it
it-
up at the top?
would it be? Wanted to throw out something. And we can just set it aside even after I throw it out at this point. Would it, I'm gonna get too far ahead, but would it be at all useful to in thinking this through down the road, to be prepared to bring in a contractor to be a hearings examiner at some point if it ever becomes necessary, or are we feeling like we're gonna be able to just handle this?
At this point, I mean, I think we have a process laid out where we can handle it with the staff that we have. Yeah, I mean, if it gets far too overburdensome, then we're gonna have to reevaluate that. But at this point, I think we've come up with a good process. I've gone through it with these guys, made sure they understand what roles they have. They can also come to me at any point throughout this process and ask about procedural questions, ask about, hey, what does the ordinance or compact say? I just can't go to the extent of writing the
Yeah,
final decision for them.
yeah, well, as a thought, just thinking about that, would urge you all to think about that, should that ever become necessary, give us plenty of lead time so we can try to find someone.
I would probably want to put him on the contract employee as opposed to
Right.
the contract.
Well,
But,
whatever the
just
term,
wanna say
yeah.
Contract should that person under. You know, the umbrella of employment, with board of the office, just so that as a.
Yeah.
Agency.
And if it's not necessary now, fine. Should it become, or you even start to think about it, we're probably gonna need a little lead time to find someone. Unless Roger wants to be the hearing examiner.
I have a conflict of interest.
Oh, I see. I see, yeah.
I don't want to open a can of worms, but let's just go through hypothetical, so. We'll put James in the hot seat. We got tagged as a designee for a water right application and an appropriation. And James has had his procedural dialogue with me and landed on the recommended decisions. You know, which is the most likely thing that see an appeal start to happen. And then that appeal to go through the administrative procedures we have to start at our office. For this scenario, I'll be in the hearings exam. Now, let's say that I concur with James's finding in this hypothetical situation. At what point then does that recommended decision become a final decision on the denial of our office?
Yeah, so if the so typically with a denial, it's gonna be that the applicant is appealing, most likely.
Yeah.
Right, because if it were granting, then great, they'd be fine with it, that's where you get an objector that would come in, would be in that situation, but in a denial, it would be the applicant most likely. You could potentially have a hearing involved in that, let's say you do, you go through a hearing in front of you as the hearings examiner. You take some time, I think we've established some timing with writing decisions as well. But after that, you would draft what would be typical to a final order of a hearings examiner. We have draft documents of that, that we showed Ethan and James. You can find any of those like on DNRC's website. It's just a typical final order. Laying out everything, so different than a findings of fact, conclusions of law. And then that final decision would be what overrules that recommended decision. And so that is now the final agency action, is that final decision.
Okay, excellent. And now let's act like they did not appeal. And recommended decision was in denial. The appeal period is now lapsed with no appeal filed or requested. Now what happens with the recommended decision? Is it just automatically mutated the final decision?
You would write a final order, which would be a closing order. Essentially saying that the timing has lapsed for appealing to the office of the engineer on this decision to deny. And then you would adopt the decision to deny that James drafted and say this matter is now closed.
Okay.
And that final order would be the final agency action that they could appeal to the board.
All right, I understand. I just needed to go through that. I thought it might be beneficial
Yeah.
for the board members.
No, it's, I think at this stage of the game, it's good to talk these through, sort of table talk these through, because I
Yeah.
think once we start doing it, it's gonna be like, okay, now what do I do?
Yep, no, and it can get messy too, so it's good to talk through it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very helpful. And also just for our speculation, we really think that this is most likely to occur with a recommended decision to deny, a recommended decision to grant modifications where the applicant might not like the modifications recommended by their recommended decision. Or if it goes out to objection, And then, our office was to, take the objector information and modify the recommended, decision in another step, either towards a recommendation to deny or an alternative type of recommendation to grant with new modifications based on the objection that was brought forward. That would be the other hypothetical scenario where we would see that within the office type appeal from that,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I was reading through that. It's involved.
It is, yeah. Yeah, which is why, you know, we wanted to have the conversations with Ethan and James in particular to go over just the basics of what a hearing looks like. And what their roles are too. I'm sure we're gonna have to, you know, go through scenarios as they come, you know, talk through all of that. Like, how do you actually conduct a hearing? We went over it briefly, but I'm sure we'll have to revisit it once one comes before you guys.
For sure, we have some new staff that are ready to plug into that process, and so definitely expect from our office that we're gonna have reboots of that type of training activity, because we're gonna have to keep those that process home. You guys would probably have some similar needs for when you start to see things, you know, hearings or hear petitions for groundwater management areas, these kind of things are gonna be, you know, an effort to get through those procedural requirements that we just to tracking what is ultimately kind of complicated process.
So there's one scroll down, so first one. Okay, so Clayton, I believe this came from you. The question was, should we include just the state of Montana, so like any agencies or departments from the state of Montana, as parties who can appear in a proceeding? So my original intent was to include only the compacting parties, to that because of standing grounds. So would, you know, some Department of Commerce with the state of Montana, would they really have standing to come before the Office of the Engineer on a permit? Probably not. It's not out of the ordinary. It's not really out of left field to be including like a holistic scope. But just wanted to provide you with the original intent. So
That's fine, and my initial thought looking at it was, though, to say Montana Department of Natural Resource and Conservation, not just because doesn't say what department.
we can definitely put Montana.
That's all I was thinking.
Okay. Well, hopefully that answers
Something-
anybody else's uncertainties.
So that would kind of like be like an amicus. In the show.
So there are certain applications where CSKT or Department of Natural Resources can become involved in the process. So like groundwater applications, CSKT, the tribes can get involved with that. So we just want to make sure to include that in the representation in general. And then it would be the engineer designee's burden to decide whether they were able to, or whether they had standing to come in.
It was more like another intermediary.
Correct, yes. Any other questions?
I just have a question on this. So could you further explain why, I guess, the compact is with the state of Montana and the CSKT tribes? And there are cases where the Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks might want to object or have it standing, so, you know, for fisheries flows or something. So if we just, should we just really limit it to DNRC?
That was my initial thought. That's why I wanted to bring it up here, was to have this conversation.
I'm just throwing it out. for
Yeah, well, that was
discussion.
what I thought. I mean, my comment really was either Montana Department of Natural Resource Conservation or simply the state of Montana, because you're saying Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. Well, that could be any note, that could be half a dozen departments there involved in those. So I just, you know, that's why I was asking, I think, the same question.
Mr. Chairman. Ironically, here that we have the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation highlighted. We have Miss Taylor Hoyt here from the department. You know, she was hoping maybe she could
I feel,
say something. Would you mind? It's about this topic here, right? Yes.
Payla, go ahead, step on up and let's. And welcome.
It's just brief, and you were already speaking about this, but from the state's perspective, I'm not sure what other departments would need to be bringing information forward in this context, but we would like to be, because we think it'd be fair to be treated in the same way as the Confederate Salish and Kootenai tribe. So if the department isn't specified for the tribe, then we would prefer the department not specified for the state as well, just so that there's parity in how they are moving this forward.
Does that, was there any, thank you. Payla.
That makes sense. Two solids.
That was, yeah, that was the reason for the question, the way I asked it, yeah, and I think what Roger is bringing up as well. Is there any legal reason not to do that, or,
No, that's fine.
okay,
Yep. There you go.
Would it be
Okay.
proper to substitute intervene instead of here?
Yes.
Yes.
if that, yeah, good.
Okay, do we have all track doing this? This, I don't think so. No, I want them to show it.
Oh, right.
It's supposed to be a hand in
Where?
the state of Montana. And
No, we're just saying both could. It doesn't have to be an either or. I mean, both could intervene. So the next one was just to clarify, I think, comment from Ken. He said, does it have to be both parties agreeing to it? No, I clarified it to be that either party, the action upon good cause can file for an extension. That was that change. Okay, there were a couple comments on the, oh yeah,
Take out the
good catch. Good with that one? So there were a couple questions on the administrative record, so I thought it would be fitting that we kind of talk over that. Because that was something that I know when we met, we were trying to really work through the admin record and how we were gonna keep it and what was gonna happen with that whole process. So the question was posed, so why only until the final decision? This was by Ken. The original intent was to have the OE responsible for the admin record up until the final decision of the engineer. And then once it's appealed to the board, then it would transition to legal for record keeping to really keep the processes separate. Obviously, I would be giving all of the documents into a folder on the share file that we're gonna try and work as the record keeping system at this point. But everything comes through me for any appeals to the board so that the office doesn't have any interference with any of those decisions being made by the board for the appeals. So that was the original intent for why it's only up until the final decision for that. We can most certainly specify that too.
The way it's written now, if I was just somebody from the public looking at it, say, oh, I can discuss it after the final decision.
Hmm.
No, your intent is perfect, I get that.
Just needs to be stated.
Yeah, I mean, sure. That's fair. No, because then it's the same thing. Just trying to think, don't we have a record keeping resolution?
Yeah,
Doesn't it say that the office of the engineer shall maintain and keep all records in the cabinets?
yeah. Well, I can't remember if it specifies cabinets or the digital archives or, right, we all need to have a big records discussion eventually here, which will spill into this administrative records, will spill into all the water rights that are in the file cabinet over there. We have 2 file cabinets, maybe or so additional records coming this way. So we're kind of at one foot in that older way of doing things, with paper records, and then another foot over in this more digital arrangement. So I do think that that's an important thing to go through, but
There is a resolution, which is for purpose.
That's exactly why I was asking that question, yeah, so we could reference it in this section, yep.
be modified appropriately as that resolution
Sure.
is modified.
But I mean, so we could put like maybe like a limiter at the beginning of this sentence and say for purposes of hearings before the OE. That way, it's not saying that the records are just gonna be thrown out right after, it's just for the purpose of this. The OE will maintain the official record for proceedings before it, okay,
And then reference the record keeping
yes,
resolution.
yeah, I think we have to figure out which one it was again.
Yeah, that's fine.
So James, will you add at the front of that sentence? Oh, you already, wait, no, will you put at the front of that sentence? First sentence. Yeah, say for purposes of hearings before the OE. Anybody have any questions about the admin record? I think, Georgia, you had a question about the verbatim record, about it being transcribed. Yeah, so I didn't write your comment on here because I wanted to just check through it. So we do have the OWL that maintains the audio of the meetings, and then you said that you have to go through YouTube or something.
Yeah, we choose, like AI software essentially to create a written transcript.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's typically not, like, a court won't go out of its way to provide a transcript to a party. They actually have to request for one, and then there's a fee typically associated with the transcript. So that's why that's in there, where if it's requested, essentially, like if a hearing is held, then it can be transcribed, but it doesn't have to be. But I know we had a weird way of doing it, so it was like through YouTube with their AI program. And how accurate is that typically?
Depends on the person, you know, if someone's started their word in one way or it's kind of low quality audio, it's not gonna transcribe it. It can be very accurate though.
Is there a cost associated with that?
No, that's a free thing that people guys.
We want to be complete and accurate, especially when it comes to hearings. So if we need additional software or recording equipment for hearings, you know, we should explore those options. I would think. Ken, you've been, like you said, done administrative hearings. I mean, I, having been involved in court hearings, know that they hire transcribers to do official records, so I don't know how far we want to go, but we want to be, yeah, I would think we want to be as complete and accurate as possible. The only way I can put it.
I think when we went over, at least the board and myself, when we went over the appeals procedures, we had discussed potentially getting microphones for the board, for the engineer designee if they have a hearing, and then potentially one for if there's any witnesses or attorneys who might present for the engineer or the board. That was an option that we had talked about to project better for the owl to capture full sentences, right?
Correct, yeah. That is actually very difficult to achieve without feedback, because we have played with that, just to let you know that I'm open to new technology. If we've got some solutions, we do have some microphones, and we'll try to get that arrangement underway. The feedback looping was a real problem. And we've looked for other avenues, you know, to try to set something up where we can put more receivers, like the one sitting over there between the chair and vice chair, on this unit and be integrated. And it's just totally block. It's on the list of things to eventually take care of.
Well, while we want to be as complete and accurate as possible, we'll want to take, you know, what best technical and legal advice the board can get on, you know, if you're satisfied, because at some point, whatever decisions we make based on those records, if they get challenged because of that, you're going to be part of helping with those challenges. So, you know, how complete and accurate do we want to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think have we seen an example of one of the transcripts, like just from a meeting,
Yeah,
a written transcript, like just printed out?
better from right now.
I think it would help the board understand just what the capabilities are of this machine that we have currently.
Yeah, maybe on a break, I can print one out here so you can review it.
Be good to see, because I know that there was a time when I was watching incorrect words come up on the screen when we were talking. So if that's the same system, it'd be good to see what we're doing.
It's to how important it's the accuracy of the record, because saying that if it's not on record, it didn't.
Well, let's just not have a record. That's not the way we're gonna go here, so, sorry. Roger.
So I sat in on a Board of Environmental Review meeting the other day. And then a week later, they published the minutes of it, and there were no errors in those minutes. So I'm just saying, maybe you could check and see what software they use, so that, and find out if that would be applicable to our situation.
Sure.
Well, since we're talking about that, you know, the NRC has been doing this for decades. Hearings examiners there use something. District courts use something, tribal courts use something. I mean, there are tools already being used. That's all I'm thinking is what's the best for us to use, and if we can explore those, that would be helpful. Options.
I am aware of a lot of the NRC's administrative records, and some of them have some of the same imperfections that you would expect. One thing that we can definitely do to improve our records is talk loud and succinctly when you're in this meeting, and that helps significantly on the transcription process. And I sometimes will, as I'm thinking, and I get quieter, Right, and that happens to me, and I think it happens to everybody a little bit, so if we can all just do what we can. In the meantime, to enunciate and speak loudly, that will help significantly.
But Mr. Chairman, when I was on Shoreline, used kind of recorder for the meetings, but when we had an actual hearing, we hired a contractor to record.
Yeah.
Just because we thought the hearings were so.
I've seen that.
And that's pretty typical. I've seen that where you just find a local court reporter. There's a whole bunch of them. I mean, like attorneys use them just for their own depositions if they have to take them. Where they can come in for the day and just pay for their time. And then typically you order a transcript from them. And then if the party wants that transcript, then they would have to pay that fee.
Well, we should lay out some of those options for the board to consider. I think in the meantime, understanding what we have is what we have, but if we can take another step and try to improve that, that's what I'm thinking. Other board members, you guys satisfied with what we're doing? You want to keep improving? You're satisfied with what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's worth exploring other options, but yeah.
Okay, so you okay with exploring other options?
Sure.
Okay. All right, we'll explore other options in the meantime.
No, keep on. Okay, so 3, I know had suggested edits from Ken and from Georgia, so I just wanted to make sure I captured those correctly. Okay, this comment came from Ken. So essentially he just wanted to know, why don't we just list out all the different burdens of proof? At least is that correct in my understanding?
I believe so.
I know, I'm sorry, I'm making you remember. Okay, so my reasoning for not including, okay. My reasoning for not including all of them was because when we had discussed kind of how the WPMP was gonna be arranged, it was that anything specific to a particular, water application was going to go in that section of the WPMP. And so everything that is applicable to all hearings in front of the Office of the Engineer was going to go here in this section. So that's why the specific burdens of proof would be included in the specific sections of the WPMP, not in the hearing section. But I'm happy to put it in here too. So that's a board decision.
My concern was not so much legally suspect, it's more with some person off the street that would that.
Probably not. Yeah.
They wouldn't know what I meant, but it says in pertinent sections of the ordinance, which means they've got to go find them, right?
Mhm.
So is your thought to actually list the burdens of proof or just reference, just reference?
I think Katie makes perfect sense. It was more of a notice, is that adequate notice? And I think legally it is.
So if someone had an electronic copy of the ordinance and typed in burden of proof, are they gonna find all the burdens of proof?
Probably not, they aren't spelled out that plainly, in the ordinance, but typically. The like first or second subsection in each water, right, application has the burden of proof in it. So essentially it's, what does the applicant need to bring this application before the Office of the Engineer? Like, what do they need to prove? I mean, I'm happy to include like a pretty simple definition of what a burden of proof is in this section.
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay. Any other questions?
Maybe this is way out there, just got me down. I know other times when I've been hearing exam, we have an issue with pre-hearing order.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where we tell everybody what they've got to do.
Mhm.
Is that something we should contemplate, or is that just make
It is,
this job much more?
no, I think, I'm glad you brought that up. I think it was already in here, wasn't it? Yeah, hearing notice. So if you scroll down, Jane, yeah, so
Okay.
subsection 6, yep. So that is everything that the engineer designee needs to include, to any of the parties that are before it. And that's basically what Ken was just alluding to, was something like a pre-hearing order, but it tells you, essentially like, when is the hearing gonna happen? Who can come before the engineer for the hearing? What are the particular sections that are at issue in the ordinance or the compact? Yeah, it's essentially like a notice to those parties of everything it needs to know prior to the hearing.
So the question I would have is, should that include something that tells the person or entity what their burden of proof they're going to be expected to prove? Is that,
So the burdens of proof actually would come before this. So for the applicant, it would be the burden of proof to bring the application, like what they would need to establish or prove before the office of the engineer. And then for an objector, there's a specific burden of proof for an objector that's laid out in the ordinance as well.
so?
Yeah.
It is taken.
Yeah. But I'm glad you brought up the pre-hearing notice, because that is a key document that you'll typically see in a lot of examinations with the hearings examiner. So like DNRC lists one out, and sometimes they're like 14 pages long. But the thing about that, and it's not to be scary, they are boilerplate typically. So once we have one done, you can pretty much copy and paste most of it and just substitute the specific facts or parties or timing.
Or ordinance sections.
Yes. Yeah. So we resolve that.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so the next couple comments I have in here are from Georgia. To balance the rules of evidence discovery, ex parte communications, and subpoena powers with the CSKT rules of evidence and or civil procedure. So I did quickly go through and have some knowledge with practicing before the tribal court here that a lot of the rules that I've already provided in here are actually more inclusive than the CSKT rules for civil procedure or evidence. There's a lot of similarities between the two, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't put some sort of reference to the CSKT rules of civil procedure and or evidence in wherever we reference the Montana rules of civil procedure. So that's just a comment I wanted to make to get you guys thinking about that. Or if there's a board decision on whether you want to use the Montana rules of civil procedure just completely, or if you want to be able to use both.
I got a reaction, Mr. Chairman, I think hearing examiners need flexibility, this kind of language, and that's pretty common language that I've seen in many places. So you can admit your says, admit everything you want, and then later on figure out what's relevant. And that pulls people. Unless it's really irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, the other question that pops to mind when you describe it the way you just did is, it seems like we'd have to say upfront which rules we're following. Otherwise, someone comes in, they get to pick and choose, and that's not what we're after either.
Right, so that's why made a decision to go with the Montana Rules of Civil Procedure and Evidence because it is more inclusive of a whole bunch of different things that a hearing examiner could use in his tool belt. So that was the decision I went with initially, but I wanted to make sure we talked about it though, because it was brought up. Yeah, of course. Thank you, delete the S, because that's not good. All right. I
The-
think I was control saving.
Yeah.
So.
So when you reference, say, rules of evidence and you say, well, you're following these rules of evidence, do we just adopt the rules and then they become ours, or do we actually reference them as state rules?
Yeah, so I mean, you would actually reference like Montana Civil Procedure Rule 4 or 56 if it's summary judgment.
You know, these rules are written very closely, and it's CSKT's administrative procedure. As far as language.
I did make sure and go through the DNRC admin rules and the CSKT admin rules when I was drafting these procedures. So I tried my best to mirror both or come up with a compromise. But when it came down to whether the engineer needed to cite specific rules of civil procedure evidence, I went with the Montana Rules of Civil Procedure Evidence just because there's more rules that you can choose from and use.
So I think and I, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and then for Georgia as well, so what I was trying to get at is, for example, I think even a lot of this tribal rules and sometimes laws mimic state and or federal laws because they actually review them, adopt them, they might change some language, but often adopt them, they become tribal because when they adopt them, they're tribal. We would have to create our own set of rules of procedure and adopt them to do that. Otherwise, you reference them either as a state or tribal procedure, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I get where you're going, yeah, so I mean, if the board really wanted to go through and draft its own rules of civil procedure and evidence, it certainly could.
Yeah.
But there's already a great wheel,
Right,
that's
right.
here, and so, yes, how you would do that is if, let's say there, just because this was on my mind, if somebody brought a motion for summary judgment before the office of the engineer, which I will go through that with you, I promise, at some point. But that's Rule 56 in the Montana Rules of Civil Procedure. And so if they were to cite any of that, or if the engineer were to cite that rule, they would say Montana Rules of Civil Procedure 56.
Well, I appreciate, when Georgia brings that up, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to figure out how else do we balance it? And I think if we looked at all of it and we accept that, the only other question I would have then is how locked in are we once we say today, these are the rules? Do rules of procedure, either state or tribal, for example, change?
Yes, they can. It's pretty infrequent, but they can. So the thing with any of these WPMPs is that the board can reopen any discussion and submit any changes. It just has to go back through notice and comment.
So get carried away maybe thinking about this, but so procedurally, if we have a set of rules, we follow them, we have a number of cases and we've gone through, followed certain set of rules. Down the road, we say, oh, well, we're going to tweak this, we're going to add this, we're going to make this change. Does that have those procedures when we change them have any effect on previous decisions we made? Could anybody look at those and say, well, geez, I wish I was working under those rules?
So think of it like, let's say there was a case that went in front of a court and previous precedent was overruled with this new decision. So even though you were citing it in maybe cases 5 years prior, because it was good law at the time, any sort of decisions you have onward have to use the most recent case decision.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just thinking it through.
Yeah, no, it's good to think about it. But to your questions and comments, pretty much anything that's included in here, I did look through CSKT rules of civil procedure and evidence, and so there's nothing that would be missing. If anything, it would just, if the board so chose, it would just be to list it as an option, or use those rules rather than the Montana rules of civil procedure, but.
Oh,
No, you just let them read that last sentence since I made that change. Okay, so this question came from Ken. This is in witness and pre-file testimony, which I know we spent a while talking about this type of situation with the complaint procedures. But this is a good opportunity to talk about it again if there are any other questions besides this one. So Ken's question was, what if another party objects to the request from a party to appear before the engineer designee via electronic means? So if they provide a good cause that, you know, such and such, they can't get to the hearing, and so they've requested that they appear via Zoom. Ken's question was, well, what if the other party objects to that? So I put a suggestion here to another party may voice an objection to electronic participation. However, the determination shall remain with the engineer or designee as to essentially the means of appearing electronically.
Why would somebody object to that?
Because it can. I mean, that's actually a reason law.
Yeah.
A really valid one, and maybe they're just somebody who doesn't like recordings, they want to see the person there, they listen to facial expressions, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm just curious. So she's posed some language, what do you think about her language?
I don't know how it's supposed to determine that.
Which part?
Determines that telephonic or video participation will not substantially prejudice any rights of any party. You know, just sounds easy to.
I would only I mean, just think out loud, I would only imagine that would go into it with the assumption that it won't.
I would do the opposite. I would go into this with the assumption that it won't, and I just deny it. Because there's not any way that I can be totally certain of it. I'm just telling you, that's how I was trying to resolve to the telephone. Video participation is not at that time. Make a determination that prejudice equals rights.
Yeah, I guess I take the opposite. You assume that it won't. And maybe that's where the objection comes in. If someone objects, say, well, this is gonna
Could we just maybe,
prejudice my rights, and so you can explain how it's gonna prejudice your rights, if nobody objects and you move on. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so typically you're supposed to present some evidence of good cause for why you can't appear in person. That's pretty typical of motions, that would request this. So, yeah, but then it would be the hearing examiner, the designee's decision on whether that was good enough. Roger, you had a question?
well, I was just wondering if you could just reword it to somehow say that granting that will not substantially prejudice the rights of a party by granting this. You know,
I have a question too.
because I don't think it's gonna prejudice somebody. I hear what Ken is saying, that you might want to watch body language and that sort of thing, but yeah, the decision is going to be made on the facts presented, not some subjective interpretation of.
Okay, let me put this scenario to you. We have gone out of our way to set this arranged hearing. Okay. My office has got pretty tight timelines. We hop on, somebody's Zoom connection's not working. We glitch in and out. You know, whatever determination I previously made will now be modified because there was trouble in the video connection, which that happens with me oftentimes. Okay, now the whole effort is, subject to this. I would have to have language that's like, it's at your own risk if you decide to participate remotely. And my goodness, what if the communication breakdown somehow happens because of a Spectrum internet outage, which is from our office? So now, it's not even on the failed communication is not even that burden of the. So, okay, so the natural thing to do is reschedule it. I'm being, I know, a little,
Well, you're,
difficult, but I'm bringing up some real, that's gonna happen.
let me respond to that, but I'm gonna go to Georgia because I know Georgia had a comment here.
Well, I was just wondering, what happens if you just delete that sentence? That takes the burden of decision off of you altogether.
I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay.
Because the burden still needs to remain with the hearings examiner to do that. Cause that gets into like rights to participate, constitutional violations. I don't.
But the right is still there, isn't it? May permit a witness to appear.
Right, but the decision needs to remain with the engineer or the designee.
The deletion of that sentence doesn't take away his ability to decide.
It not necessarily, but the standard is then gone. So this is substantially prejudice the rights of any party is a very common hearings examiner standard or burden that is placed on hearings examiners. So that language actually is cited in the DNRC admin rules. It's cited like there's federal rules that have that exact language too. So it's a common phrase.
Gotcha. Well, I was just trying to make your life easier there.
So, but to follow up on the opposite side, I'm a person who I want to participate in this hearing, but I cannot make it. The only way I can participate is by video. If you say no, isn't that a violation of my rights? Participate?
It would depend on what your reasoning was. If you don't provide any good cause, then there's nothing for him to make that decision on.
Well, I would say I provide a good cause. I'm just saying I cannot make it. There's no way I can make it. I cannot make it to this hearing on this day.
I'm in the hospital.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Another option too, that is afforded to the engineer designee is that they can always reschedule or extend when the hearing might take place. So if there was something that was submitted by a party saying, I can't do this, this is why, can I appear via Zoom? Another option that the hearing examiner or the designee can take or make, I guess, is due to, certain circumstances raised by the applicant and for good cause shown, the engineer determines that the hearing shall be rescheduled to such and such date. So that's another option as well.
Well, if we retain all of this, I just want to be real careful though. I wouldn't want Ethan's office to come out publicly and say, whatever this says, I'm just gonna deny it anyway. We can't do that. They have to have the option, they have to be able to make the request and be heard. A blanket, well, I'm just gonna deny it anyway means, what good is it having, what good is it to have it? If there's this presumption of denial to begin with, I don't know that we can do that.
Yeah, I mean, if there's some way to like rephrase this, so that I'm not on the hot seat on this determination.
Well, maybe some training on
I'm gonna be a
that.
lot more likely to be.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, maybe some training on that, because if that's standard language, so maybe take some time to just kind of review that and talk it over and think about how that's supposed to work, because I get your gut reaction to that, but if that's typical standard language for hearing examiners to be confronted with or have in their toolbox, I think it adds flexibility myself, but that's just me.
Sorry, obviously that's the basic job of the hearing stuff, but make those tough decisions.
Mhm.
And that is something that we talked about briefly, about those types of decisions, but that's also something that your office can ask of legal counsel, is to help you understand what does substantially prejudice mean.
Well,
That was it.
for all of us, like right next, I'm like, this
You
is.
can't, and I
Yeah.
understand the question, right, but I know you heard it, but no, I'm gonna say that because it really truly does.
Yeah.
Depend on it, I mean, if there's a constitutional question going on, like, let's say they. It's a disabled applicant and they cannot make it in here, they don't have a ride in, they cannot drive a car, you know, and such, but they do have internet access. Then maybe that is. Maybe it raises to the level of where, you know, if you were to deny that, it would substantially prejudice their rights.
Well, the other way I look at it too is, you know, so much of this property is owned by outside corporations anymore. You know, I mean, you could be dealing with somebody a lawyer in Connecticut, and he doesn't want to fly out here. He wants to zoom in and have a call. So, you know, to just blanket deny a request for a Zoom isn't. I
Is
mean,
that lawyer licensed in Montana then?
well, yeah, it could be. I don't know. They'd have to
In
be.
our rules, they have to be.
They have to be, yeah. So, but you know, I'm just throwing out for it.
And the thing that you just brought up though was the other way around. Where like if we didn't allow it, then it would be substantial prejudice.
Yeah, I did the negative.
Right, but so this though is different. This is if we
It's
do allow
the
it,
opposite.
right? But then that's because that's the part where I'm like, well, how does that? How can that? I mean, it would be, really comes down to like whether or not the connection was sufficient for the communication, right? So now we go back to like my personal experiences with Zoom. You know, and there's also no way for us to verify whether or not somebody's connection at the other end was sufficient.
Can't you just ask them
Yeah,
and then reschedule?
So. This is typically not asked for often. Most proceedings, like court proceedings, like hearing examination proceedings, are done in person.
Okay.
And it's for a reason, because of X, Y, and Z, you just can't control, right? So most of the time they are, but you have to give people the ability to request this type of hearing because of, who knows? Maybe it is my scenario I provided.
Well, and you have the option of either telephonic or video. It doesn't have to be video, could be telephonic.
I mean, Ken, for example, when you were sitting on hearings, how often did you ever have a request to appear via Zoom or over the phone?
Never.
Yeah.
But I think Roger makes a good point, there's many summer Yeah, I'm here for 2 months here, I think we're going to LA or Texas or wherever. I think your feeling is we're probably gonna get more than we have shoreline other. I did have a suggestion, maybe it helps here, so take out the word unlimited.
There you go.
I don't mind that.
That softens the, takes some of the burden away from Ethan.
Fine.
Well, just to add another fun wrinkle. I watched a documentary last night that showed that the head of Google now sends his avatar to public meetings to participate for him. So, you know, that's the next thing we'll have to deal with.
And I
right?
don't know what an avatar is. in
So
that-
he's
in that
made a-
case.
He's made an AI copy of himself that speaks and delivers his speeches. And he did it because he often has to participate in meetings in other countries and he can't speak Mandarin, but his avatar can. So there
Wow.
you go.
Well, the other thing about this procedurally is that whatever decisions are made then become regardless appealable. Should an applicant or an
Yeah.
objector decide, well, however it went, I didn't like it, it prejudiced my rights of, and here's out prejudice, so they can appeal it then. Chances are that's not gonna happen, but that option is here and gives the person the opportunity to make that request.
Not until the final decision though. Yes.
But yeah,
Can you add this to the end of it where, you know, based on information available to the engineer or the designee at the time the request is being made? Because that provides a finite group of factors for the determination.
After determines. Well, based on evidence.
presented. You just say based on evidence presented, correct?
At the time of the request that you make, you know. And I would even say available instead of provided, just available. Right, because then you have to be provided, just, I would even go with information instead of evidence though.
Well, available means that it gives you that means it might be available and they didn't provide it and you didn't look it up, then that's on you.
Okay.
That's on you.
Yeah.
That's an improvement, sorry.
Can we have it where the requesting
provide
party
it.
has to provide it to you?
Okay,
Yeah,
I would do that, yeah.
I don't want you to have to do any like
Yeah, if it's available,
outside research.
yeah, you guys definitely are, right.
And you can, information is fine. There's no evidentiary standard, so.
Comment made.
So do we want to take that suggestion and essentially copy paste it either before or after the sentence that's highlighted? I think it should come after. Okay. Perfect. Now you
And then
can. Sure.
Well, I think that adverse witness stuff needs to be a separate paragraph. Talking about a totally different section.
So the A part you may call. The sentence right after when you just, yep, just go down, yep, and down. There you go.
Good.
Okay, so I just marked spots where you had made comments, but it's the same thing that we had talked about, with the CSKT rules. So this is, for example, like this is where I cited to Montana Rules of Civil Procedure. I just went with an initial gut reaction.
Just to back up a second, I don't have any changes or comments on the rest of that previous section. Other than that, I had to read it about 3 times to figure out what it said. And I think I might have figured it out.
Yeah,
So people are gonna read that and have to understand that, so anyway.
it gets dense
Yeah.
when you get into witnesses, and pre-file testimony. Like I said, this is, a lot of this mirrors either the, DNRC admin rules for hearings, or the CSKT admin rules.
Yeah.
So, it's not something that the public hasn't seen before. Yeah, you can, I just wanted to point out where we were.
So, may I ask a question?
Yep.
Would it be appropriate, perhaps prior to this section, just to give an explanation as to why we are defaulting to Montana Rules of Civil Procedure? You know, the explanation that you give it is a good one. My only thought that was driving my comments is this reads very state heavy. And I understand what you're doing, but someone else would spend. So I just want to, whenever possible, indicate this is a state and a tribal board, the state and tribal procedure. So if there is a rationale for defaulting to the Montana Rules of Civil Procedure because tribal rules mirror those, would it be appropriate to state that somewhere?
So to just remind the board of the WPMPs in general. So this entire section will be implemented into the entire WPMPs. There's an introduction page of the WPMPs that specifically says that this whole entire document is a state and tribal effort, based on language within the compact and ordinance. So anything that's included within the WPMPs has that in mind, yes. Yeah.
I heard, thank you for saying, I think you need, that's just an awful lot of verbiage right there. So when you have a cursor, I think that you're starting into a new subject. Probably make that a new paragraph.
Mhm.
No, not another numbered paragraph, just. You know,
Yeah, so I will be candid here. This, the structure of the WPMPs, I struggled with the drafting the hearing section. I'm very used to when you're writing rules or code that you do subsections of a section. And so, yes, I would typically have done multiple subsections of one section. But I tried to keep it within the structure that was determined in previous WPMPs.
was it criticism? Just.
No, I wanted to make it clear because I do struggle with the structure entirely of the WPMPs. So especially when I'm thinking about it and how rules and codes are drafted. So that I just want to make that general statement. Yeah,
So you prefer subsections?
I do.
Okay, well, I think we just need to be consistent with it.
Right. So doing what you suggested with just creating a new paragraph underneath that same section is fine.
Okay, can I make everybody mad? Back to 8. Yeah, approval, put on the time that each party shall be, the very lessons shall be poured enough to attend the materials, so, you know, should that be text?
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Good catch, Ken.
yeah, and then. The other stuff. can be taken out.
And Georgia, your comments, you might want to go back and, or we might want to go back and read that introduction at some point. Just to make sure it's inclusive enough.
Well, I was processing what you were saying and I understand that it references that it's a state and tribal process. Does it say specifically though that the rules are state and tribal? That defaulting to the Montana rules are the rationale for that?
No. No,
And maybe there's not a need to, it's just, when you read through it to me, and I'm not an attorney, and I'm not trying to muddy the waters here. And you gave a great explanation, but it just reads state head. And that was my only concern.
yeah, and I appreciate that concern, which is why when I was drafting, I did look at both, but, because CSKT is a PL 280 tribe, it does mirror a lot of the state code. And so that's just common knowledge,
Okay.
out of any.
To everyone that.
Well, no,
just
it's a good question, but there are a lot of similarities within the tribe's code to the state's.
Maybe just a thought, the introduction, adding a sentence somewhere in the introduction that says that
Yeah,
state and tribal rules of civil procedure were considered in the drafting of this, of these WPMPs.
yeah, we can definitely. add some-
That way, it says at least they're considered. And we're aware it's considered, and when we make the decision, you know, it's clear that it's, for us at least, that it's sort of an amalgamation, the whole thing ends up being an amalgamation of both state and tribal.
I think that would help the next
Proceed.
board too, that they may not know the genesis of this, and that gives some built-in institutional knowledge.
Some context.
I mean, I would even go as far to say that state and tribal policies, because we've been looking at, you know, the water quality policy of the tribe. The federal, like water quality, the state water quality, I mean, like, there's a whole bunch of policies that we've been looking at. And so I think at least acknowledging that we've considered both state and tribal policies and determining these procedures would be a good addition, so. Let's just, I'll make a note. Yeah. I should probably go right below it too. I think somebody caught that one. Can't remember who, but good job. Will you correct the grant? Oh, it should be a cat one. Any questions about this change? I just made it so it read better, but
Is this something that should be read by the engineer designee started proceedings or have someone accept?
what was the last part? Sorry.
Or when someone starts acting up,
Yeah,
so you don't let people speak.
so, you'll find those typically in like the pre-hearing notice as well, like disruption of hearings, this is what it is. But to actually read it before the parties, it typically only occurs when if it actually happens in a hearing. And it's just to say that you've already been provided notice that you aren't supposed to be disrupting in the hearing, in the pre-hearing order, and so now I'm reading you that procedure. And then you can make enforcement actions if they keep disrupting.
Yeah. So do you think reading that when you start the hearing, sending out the notice is a good idea to set the stage, set the expectation?
It might be in some cases, and I think you probably have a sense of that. You have a sense it's gonna get dicey.
Yeah.
But
Just go ahead and take the time to do. I like that idea. Yeah, so.
Yeah, depending on like what the situation might be or who the parties are, if you have a feel of it, I mean, cause you'll have a little monologue before a hearing. Of kind of just the procedural things that you'll need to read through, so if that's something you feel like you need to read through again, most definitely. There was a comment here, otherwise. Showing. Okay, so, oh yeah, this one came from Ken. And his question or comment was just, what is the format of the final decision? And then I also added on there the recommended decision, so we briefly talked about that. When we chatted about it in February, we wanted to mirror it similarly to just the state-based hearings process. So the technical report would be a findings of fact, conclusions of law, so that's the recommended decision. And then the final decision of the engineer would be a final order. So similar to like what a hearings examiner would produce that could then be appealable to the next jurisdiction. But we did not, to answer your question, we did not specify that.
Okay.
So we can most certainly add.
Well, if I remember, it's somewhere else in the
The complaint procedures. It is. Although the complaint procedures are a little different, because there's not a recommended decision, it's just the final decision by the engineer. And in that procedure, we determined that the final decision in a complaint would be a findings of fact, conclusions of law. I wish I had the examples that we talked over in February, just ready to, if at break, I can pull up the examples that we went over with these two to show you guys like what we anticipate the recommended decision and the final decision to look like, if that's helpful.
So, ready for a break?
Yeah.
We're at break.
We're almost
Take that
done with this section.
Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah, we finish this section and take a break.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't think there's any other comments that anybody had, so.
Okay, I had two or three. Did we get all of mine? I don't remember what they were. I just know that I thought I had
I thought it
a
did.
few.
Let me just,
but
let me.
If you've covered them, fine. I think most of what I commented on is probably covered.
It is very possible that I was maybe looking at like Ken's at the same time, so.
That's okay. Maybe during break we can figure it out.
Oh, okay, so I know. Yeah, I did miss, I think, one of yours, Clayton, so it was at the very top. So extension of time, which is section 3. You go all the way up. Okay, so Clayton asked, is there a limit on extensions? It depends. So that is a decision that the engineer designates.
Okay.
So if there's still good cause that they, the party is demonstrating in a motion or a request for an extension, then the engineer designee is able to grant that. But the engineer designee can also reject the extension if they feel like it's been far too many extensions, or if there's not good cause. So for example, in a water court proceeding, if I'm involved in it, sometimes there's proceedings where there's a seventh request for an extension, because we're trying to gather all the evidence we can, or we're working with experts. And they take a long time to look at something. And it's not anything that we can necessarily control, but it is something that the water court is very apt to granting. But it's up to the water court to decide that, so
Your,
that's an example.
your comments about additional extensions, I hadn't even thought of, I was thinking of the length of
Oh,
an extension. And it seems like, so that was my question,
gotcha, so time limit,
yeah,
okay. Typically, that's gonna be brought up in the request. So a party is gonna say, I request that the deadline extends 30 days. Or 60 days or 90 days, those are common timelines. And then again, it's on the engineer designee to determine if that timeline is fair.
but later on in the document, there is, looked to be like there was a time period.
There are statutory
Is
time
it-
periods within this.
Which I thought was relevant to that. No,
It could be, it would depend on when the extension is brought.
well, later on, is there like a 60 or 45 days, something later on in the document? There was some kind of limit. There you go.
Oh, are you talking about the additional evidence or argument that?
I don't know.
Cause so it's, yeah, that. Is that what you're referencing?
Maybe.
Okay,
I don't
so
know.
that is actually in the ordinance. And that's additional evidence or argument for, essentially like staff to collect, other factual evidence. Or request.
Is that the only place there was days? Just there? Yeah. Anyway, you might want to take a look at that. I thought there was something written in the following sections that might actually have applied to the limit. I thought that was what set the limit, that there was a limit, it just wasn't stated there. So anyway,
No, I don't, at least. For me remembering. I don't believe I put anything in there that would actually set a specific time.
okay,
limit.
if I find it again, I'll flag it for you.
Great. So I know that was one.
Aren't extensions just kind of the length of time it's based on the request that the requesting party makes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, so a typical example would be if I filed something for my client, I said, we request 30 days from the deadline to gather additional evidence necessary to resolve the matter. And then I would propose 30 days. So it'd be on me as the requesting party to propose the actual time limit for the deciding body to grant or reject.
So back to my question on there, if there's no limit, I mean, if somebody says, well, I need a year,
The engineer or designee could reject that. Yeah. I mean, the thing with any motion is that you have to provide some sort of substance or reasoning or good cause for why you're asking the deciding body to grant your motion. So if you're just asking for a year just because, then it's probably gonna be rejected.
well, maybe they've got a reason. I'm just suggesting, I thought maybe there was some typical time frame, but maybe, that's fine.
And, the other party can also always object.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
There's actually some motions too, in just for example, in state proceedings where you actually have to ask the opposing party if they object to the request or not. So for example, again, in water court, like, we have to contact the opposing counsel and ask, are you opposed to this extension for 60 days? Typically, most of the time they'll say no, but sometimes they do, and you have to note that in your request. So Clayton, I went through and that was the only one that I missed from your comments.
That's fine. Thank you. There was a comment there. Did you cover that? Oh, yeah, you covered that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because we're gonna talk about that after the break, or I'll show you all the
Okay,
examples, yeah.
okay. I think you have less comments toward the end because everybody got tired of reading.
I think there's some truth to that.
I know.
But we did read it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Just not as thoroughly.
I have to say though, I loved having the opportunity to review this in advance and really sit and take the time. So,
Did everybody, did a SharePoint work out for everyone? You enjoyed having to
yes.
share your document? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I like that.
I don't know if I did it right. I mean, I tried to get in and I opened up and I made my comments in a Word document and sent them to
Yeah.
Haley, so
Yeah.
I don't know that I did
Which that works too.
the rest of it right. I probably did it wrong.
I think I did it the same way as you.
Yeah.
You
Well, he sent it to Ethan and he forwarded it to me. But it got to me regardless, so.
See, Clayton, that's where you start, and then in a year, you're gonna be sending your avatar to tell.
know. How do you know? I'm not an avatar.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, like it's insurance commercial, the buildings just. Now, robots are so human like.
Yeah. All right. Do we finish? Time for break? Guys good enough? Okay.
So when we come back, are we going to hear the rest of this? And then are we gonna make a motion to advance this forward then? Is
Yeah,
that-
if we're, that's where we're at, right? To put this out to public.
Yep, I'll show you the examples of the recommended decision and the final decision so you can understand it. And then, yes, the next action would be to send it out for public comment.
Okay. All right. Break. All right, welcome back. Break. All right, where are we? Okay, Haley or Ethan, which one here?
So before the break, we talked about showing the board some example documents from the hearing procedure. So
Okay.
this is an example of a recommended decision. Again, like this is just a template that we kind of envisioned, looking at a couple different examples of recommended decision, well, not recommended decisions, but findings of fact, conclusions of law. So this is how we envisioned it to look with the header. You'll have the permit number that will be put in that first blank, so that'll always be what your case is titled as, and then you can fill in the blanks there. In the introduction, you go into a background section. Typically this is like a procedural background section on what's happened so far. Keep going down. Okay, and then here's where you get into like your findings of fact, conclusions of law. So you go into each specific element of the application. You would make your findings of fact. And then you would also make your conclusions of law within each of those elements. So you can just go through the analysis. So here, for example, you would have like general conclusions of law for beneficial water use permit applications. This is all language that comes out of the ordinance. Go through. So the engineer, the designee could supplement whatever they wanted into this, they could take out some of this. So there's an adverse effect, which is an element. Adequate diversion. Beneficial use, so this example is for a permit, that would come into the office of the engineer. That's your interest. And then the last thing you end with is the recommended decision, so it's your conclusion. So that would be where the, let's say, for example, James, you were writing the recommended decision as the designee. This would be where James would conclude that the office of the engineer should, let's say, deny the application. That's their recommended decision. So that's what you would input there. And then every single recommended decision has to be noticed to the public pursuant to the ordinance. And so this is a tip of like a standard paragraph that's in any of the findings of fact, conclusions of law, it's just a notice statement. And then in the ordinance, there are certain notice requirements for recommended decisions, which includes posting on the website and then also potentially sending it out to interested parties as well. And it would be signed. And then served on any of the parties who are involved in this case.
Do these forms go out with the document for public review?
That's the notice piece, yeah.
Please ask them when they make a motion to put the WP out for.
Oh, no, they do not, because this is technically considered a
Okay.
form.
Next.
Question, may, when you say, go back up to service. You say and or electronic mail, are you saying we can do service by electronic mail
Yes,
only?
Yeah, it specifically says that in the,
not only, you can choose either or. So some people don't provide an email, so they would be served via US postal mail.
Do you get that presumption of service if it's email?
That is listed as an option within the ordinance.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
sorry, just the word form triggers me a little bit, like I think of this as like an administrative template,
Mhm.
right? Not like
It's not an application.
not an application form, just so you, this is really an administrative tool. We don't see, this doesn't need to go out for review, you don't have to take any action on it, unless you wanted to review this, which of course we welcome that, but I just want to make a clarification at present that that wouldn't be on the point to have to take any action about it unless you took it, put it on your plate.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why it wouldn't need to go out for public comment is because you wanna afford the most flexibility to the engineer and designee to draft their decision with whatever is in front of them. So if the public were to limit that in some way, then that could potentially be an issue with how they determine and potentially conflict with the ordinance as well. So this was something that Ken brought up, the pre-hearing notice. I found it in my documents, so I just wanted to show you all like what an example of that would look like. So typically, this is what the notice of the hearing would look like. This comes directly out of the admin rules, this template. So you would show the time, the date, and the manner in which those are done. So typically a pre-hearing conference is done via Zoom, or it is now more so than anything. You can still require it to be in person, but a lot of the times it is electronic appearance for pre-hearing, which means you're just talking about what to expect for the hearing, so it's not the actual hearing. And then here's where you kind of have your boilerplate, so you keep kind of scrolling, so like failure to appear, what would happen with it, notice of appearance, that's where you could have, if you have any legal representation, then they would have to file a notice of appearance with the office of the engineer and saying, I represent such and such in this proceeding. This is the purpose for why you're providing a pre-hearing conference. And then here's where you list out like all of the deadlines for everything, so these are deadlines that would happen like prior to the hearing itself. So think of those like really big, like chunky word sections that we just went over in the procedures, so like witnesses, discovery, deposition, anything like that. Those are the deadlines that you're looking, that the engineer or designee would set for the hearing. And so you'll notice that the very last one would be to submit response briefs to pre-hearing motions. So that comes before the pre-hearing conference, then you have a deadline for the pre-hearing conference. And your very last deadline is when the hearing is. Then you can provide a little case summary on what's going on. Then here's where we would implement the hearing procedures that would be adopted. So if there's specific sections that the engineer or designee wants to cite, they can put that in the pre-hearing notice as well. There's like subpoenas in there, which we briefly talked about, evidence. Discovery. These are all taken out of the procedures that we just talked about.
Is this something I can access? Is it on the website?
No, but it should be in the share file.
You should add this to the.
We'll add it to the share drive, and then we'll do another round of emailing you a link to that share drive to see how it works. And try to, because ultimately when we start housing more and more documents that you want to share, with the whole board, that's gonna be a great resource, using that directory.
That's very well done.
Haley, does the lawyer have to attend the pre-hearing meeting? Does
If-
legal counsel?
If you're represented, typically the attorney will be present and not necessarily the party.
And does this track, you'd have to have a legal representation if you're a corporation, right? So that's mandatory for some ownership types.
Yes. Okay, so then the last document I wanted to show was what we envision the final decision of the engineer designee to look like. Obviously, it won't be engineer / designee, whoever is gonna write it is gonna put engineer or designee, so I just wanna put that on there to show you that it could be either or. So again, a little background, and typically, so typically in the background section, I wanted to point this out, so that like start of the second paragraph on there, the I hereby grant. Yeah, so you typically wanna put like your actual decision right up front, and then you go through it, and then you restate it again. But it's so that whoever is receiving this, whatever party is active in this case, understands what the actual decision was right up front. So again, background and procedural history, go into legal standards, so that's again just citing sections of the ordinance or WPMPs or the compact, so anything that's actually binding on the office of the engineer would be cited in here. So these are just examples, I just put in some language. Okay, discussion is where you would go into, like, this is what was presented at the hearings. This raises like a question of, a legal question to the sections of the ordinance pertaining to permits. And then here is, how those facts implicate the law, and you make the legal conclusion there. So essentially, you're just tying it all together, right, in that discussion. And then a conclusion. And then the final order is, and then, so this is common in like the hearing examiner orders. So if you look at like DNRC's hearing examiner orders, they have this last paragraph like this where it's the final order. And so it basically spells out everything that those parties need to know. So it's like it's basically like the key holding of the final decision. Again, it needs to be noticed. This is a final agency action, so it needs to be noticed to the public. And there it is. Questions?
Simple.
That's all?
I gotta say, I thought Haley and John, to whatever, I don't know how much he actually contributed to this, but made this like, from what seemed like a pretty overwhelming project to, with this structure, I think we can, seems manageable now, and, thank you.
Helpful, thank you. That coupled with the, is hopefully a simplified flow chart will help keep everybody on track.
I do need to update your flow chart.
We'll get there.
That flow chart is amazing.
Amazingly awful.
We'll get there.
Questions?
No, any questions? Okay. So back on the document before we approve it for public, so the record piece, so we have the example of
This is a written version of what YouTube can create based off of our owl recordings.
yeah, and I don't know how else to say it, but I don't like it. Don't need time, we need names, and they don't look like minutes or transcribed minutes to me. But it's what we got right now. So looking at other options as we move forward would be helpful, in my opinion. So, yeah. And I think as we are piecing together options, I had suggested to, we look at other technologies, but I suggested that we also add to our list of options, stenographer, reporter option. Even for our meetings. Not that they have to be here, but if we set this up so that we have a digital recording of the meetings, that's a good recording that we can turn over to them and they can transcribe that. If you're doing that, then that's a tool we can use even for hearings. But just a thought, so we could at least see the cost of that. I don't know, are you on boards that do that?
Yeah, no, I check onto that Board of Environmental Review thing. I was impressed with that, because people were talking at all different levels, and a week later, they had the full minutes of the meeting, 80 pages on their website, and none of it was all, well, there was no grammar mistakes, there was, no spelling mistakes, it was all there.
I have a friend who works for them. I can ask her.
Okay. Yeah, or just look on their website to see who the administrative person is. They could probably tell.
All right, with that, so before we take action, are you ready for public comment on this? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so any public comment on the, what is it, water policy procedures, discussion workshop, water policy procedures, Office of Engineering, hearing sections. 7.11, so public comment on anything we just went through on that section. So, one public comments, okay. Any public online?
If anyone online would like to make a public comment, you can raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. I'm seeing no public comment.
Okay, and this is going out for public, official public comment, so if you're ready, we'll take a motion to submit this, section with the revisions that we just made for, out for public comment. What's the length of time?
15 minutes.
So I'll make a motion to, release these sections we just, modified for 15-day public comment.
Motion by Ken,
I'll second.
second by Georgia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, approved.
Okay. Good
Ding,
job,
ding,
Ed.
ding, ding, ding. All right, thank you. And that worked. I think everybody's starting to get used to the idea of getting the comment, getting the sections ahead of time. If you've got more sections for us to read ahead of time, we can do that. You know, that helps you, that helps us. So. Okay, I'm reading correctly. I'm on to number 5, which is now the water engineer report. First item on there was gonna be the budget. So, we're gonna have a bit of a discussion about this. That's gonna, I think, the last meeting, we had, set up a board committee to do some review of this. I think Georgia and Roger have done some things, but why don't we start with what's in the document here in the file, and why don't you go through that with us? And then I think there was also a suggestion. I think you sent out a spreadsheet. Maybe you can kind of, I didn't print it out, so Roger printed it out. Maybe you can kind of walk us through everything and so we can kind of see where we're at. Then we continue our discussion.
All right, I'm gonna drive here from David's machine if that's okay. And through. That's the top. I don't want to ask for a shut the movie off. Please, that'd be great. All right, thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Chairman, board members, what I have, here in front of you is kind of like the draft. I think we finally got things at a draft level where, you know, what I would think would be a great idea is that I would be able to meet with the budget committee. I think we've got, you know, kind of enough here to start working to make sure we get what is needed. The huge time consuming factor that has been a major player in this has been getting all this information together. So this information is all of the debits and credits associated with all board purchases and actions since it started in 2022. And it really took quite a bit of sleuthing to match each of these activities up with the actual, what the charge was for. And in some cases, you'll see a lot of things like these right here, that just say Intuit payroll S, and those are conglomerated charges, you know, that actually, you know, when you look at the QuickBooks reporting board, has got multiple sub payroll events in each one of those. So it's I'm pretty happy that we're closer to having this information better organized. But this is part of what, you know, a lot of where I would start are, and we still have some information gaps here in September of 2023, which you can see. I intend to get these filled in. We're going to keep nailing that down because we do need to have all of the 2023 information set up as well. But really the whole premise of this particular set of information is predicated on the board's bank account transaction information. So that's this, you know, the main source of information, and then tying that into descriptive information to describe each of those events is, you know, that's the follow-up. Additionally, we have two accounts. This one, the operations account, is the general checking account for the board. You know about when this gets funded for me because we have a formal budget transfer request. I do that in typically $100,000 increments, and I try to do it after the operations account starts to dip below $50,000. The appropriations account is a money market account, and it has the benefit of earning interest. And since this account was opened in September of 2023, you know, we've picked up, you know, that level of earnings off of the money that's been stored in there. And this recognizes that there's fees, and go ahead, and that part of that balance is needed fees associated with it. So I was able to convert one of the, you know, when you go right to here, this table is the budget that was set forth in the funding agreement. And this budget designated staffing array, staffing, you know, subtotal, operation expenses, so forth. There's a, you know, total recurring, and then there's a one amount of one-time money that occurred for this funding agreement that is not slated to occur for the next funding cycle. Okay. This originally came to us with a July 1st to June 30th funding, you know, calendar or funding schedule, excuse me, fiscal year schedule. I'll get myself together here. That was not going to really work out for the board because your accountants needed to have a calendar year. Also, the transfer of the money ended up a little later than was expected, and so this board actually took action. One of the things that we needed to do is have a buffer between the appropriation transfer and the spending of the money. You put it into a resolution, and that you know, our fiscal year is a calendar year. So the idea is that we would take future funding amounts, and then there'd be that delay, and we wouldn't start using that money until the following January. Okay, and that would allow also for us to make adjustments in a more timely fashion if budget changes and we need to make adaptations to staffing or plan purchasing. Maybe we'll figure out if that court stenographer fits in the budget or not during that time. We had one of these also, by the way, for the first funding agreement, which I've got up here. It's anyway, just it's in here for reference. I felt like that was a good thing to keep hold of. So now what I've got right here is I took this we generally take the funding agreement and, do a comparison. What was funded and what are we actually spending? And so this is the staffing array for the office right now. You'll see we have some vacant positions still. We've not picked up a hydrogeologist. And additionally, what you'll notice is that we do have some salary differences between what the funding agreement had provided for and what we have implemented or budgeted for. Now, I want to try to be clear, it's a little complicated, but our budget looks at the higher end of the positions. Some of those positions at present have not met that level. And the idea is that we have some positions that are higher and they're set to move forward in promotion plans and so forth. And these numbers were really the actual numbers, both budgeted actual and real-time actual, were kind of hard to come by. And so I'm going to come back to this to this, and I'm going to walk you instead over to this table here. This is a tool that I had to really build so that we could convert those QuickBooks single time deposits into meaningful information. And it gets a little complicated, but I'm just going to sort of explain to you why it's complicated. So we've got this fiscal year as a calendar year, and we have our pay check schedules on pay periods, and each year has 26 pay periods. They're 2-week pay periods, and so what you end up with is all the months have at least 2 pay periods, and then 2 of the months have 3, right? And so what you see here is for January, right? We have pay periods 1 and 2. As we go down, as we go down, you see March has 3, right? And this is what this table really does is it takes all of the individual staff folks and applies their individual pay period information. It consolidates it into monthly time steps, which is something that the board was interested in for their ultimate ledger, the budget ledger accounting. And anyway, I hope that's making sense. And this also tracks variance. And variance in this case would be either from step increases that haven't happened yet, or from vacancy savings, or in some cases, somebody's making some overtime, and that would go into a variance in the other direction, right? Instead of the savings as an additional cost. So kind of showed you the lengthwise did this. This is all of the employees here. We've got, an annual budget based on their higher end. We've got a budget to date, which this looks to the end of July for this particular exercise. This will be able to be changed, as each month goes by. We got, the actual expenses up through July, and then we've got the variance information.
So then this goes completely over my head, which is expected. When you say budget today, what do you mean by budget today? This stuff.
Okay, so if you have an annual budget,
Which is stuff that you plan to spend.
plan to spend through July.
Okay, and
So we have to have that budget to date so that we can look at how off is our actual from our budget to date. Otherwise, we'd be going against the comparison of an annual number,
so
right?
is that money you've already spent, or is that just what you should have planned to have spent?
Right, so this right here is money that we had planned to spend by July.
Okay,
This right here is what we have actually spent
okay.
by July. And it's a pretty big difference in that.
So that's from January 1 to July 1.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
And what you also see here is that we had a regular number of hours that is our staffing plan, right? And that by the end of July, we would have expected to have 9,300 staff hours committed to projects. And then you see that we actually have much less staff hours committed than what we would like to have had. And that, you can take that information, you can directly equate that to, you know, challenges in workflow and so forth, because we have a planned staffing level that is, you know, quite a bit higher than where we're at.
Well, that's just a function of the number of people you have hired.
Yes,
So, but you and a while back you mentioned that your budget includes built-in pay raises. But you can't track that until it actually occurs.
this does track that until it actually occurs. And so what you see down here, you know, as we go down, we have, sorry, I found a good spot for you. You know, where we have the actual budgeted dollar amount versus the, you know, the actual. These are not always the same. And so it's necessary to have that separated out so that we can track the difference between that budgeted amount and the actual amount. And part of the reason is it does give us an opportunity to repurpose that money to training or other things. But it gives us an idea of where we're at in terms of where our planning is versus, you know, where our reality is. And this has, as we go down, and these red verifications are just those to do some math checking, okay? So don't get too wound up about those, but you know, here's the headliners for each of these, you know, positions and where we're at with things and what we can do with this tool is we can modify positions, modify salaries, and it can be brought forward into the, you know, the bigger picture budget array in a form that is more meaningful than having all this detail. But because you know, the way things work, we have you know, these FICA, you know, type of expenses are a little different than what you project. Generally, you know, our indirect costs for taxes, unemployment, and so forth are usually around 11%. But it is actually a bit different, you know, per employee. Specifically, your unemployment is higher for field going employees versus office employees and so forth. So we start off with this general 11% for projection value, which is pretty accurate. That's what you see. You see that formula right here. You know, so that's where you take somebody's regular hours and you multiply that by 11%. Now you'll see also that this happens down here. We have the tool that allows us to have the health benefits included in this. We also have the retirement included in this. So this way, in those, you'll notice those are monthly projections. Oops, sorry about that. And so, you know, we didn't have things set up here in January, but we as we move forward, we did get things. I'm looking at somebody who's not hired on that, but you know, we do have these accounted. Oh, I remember we got things set up in February, but there was a lag time, and yeah. Anyway, so we have each of the employees set up in this matrix right now, which, you know, kind of is a really detailed way to do things. QuickBooks would do this for us automatically, by the way. I just want to let you know that this is me having to replace, you know, kind of a more agency standard type of program to get at some of the questions that we needed to have answered. But this is how it had to happen. And anyway, that's probably a little bit boring, and I would love to sit down with the budget committee and go through that in crazy detail, but That said, I recognize maybe higher elevation views appropriate here. So, we go back over here to the comparison table. And what this comparison table does is, again, it sort of starts off with this original state-based funding array. And then it looks over here to, what are we actually budget projecting? And I have, one thing that needs to be kind of clarified here. This, array had in-kind, expenses, from the state for, Kathy Schubert, who was working, for the state at the time. And so the staffing projection of 708, included not having this in-kind commitment, whereas the next funding agreement would be having this in-kind commitment integrated back in. So
Well, to me, what the state gave you is what their idea or their concept of what your staffing needs are, then you need to just take it and make it what it really is in actuality. You're gonna have different numbers for all of those categories. It's obvious, so I see where you're going, but I mean, that one-time thing was courtesy of the state or something to transition, but it's not a hard and fast number. I mean, your staffing is gonna be what it actually is.
And that's what this difference is, because these are our projected values.
I get that.
I
get that.
Okay, sorry, but I did try to hold this. I wish, when we get down here, you'll see that, I mean, our money's pretty spoken for. And
That's
so
what
I don't,
Certainly been.
I would like to have this, part of my discussion is like things I'd like to see that were an increase. But, I mean, as far as I understand it, and it was told to me, September before this funding agreement was even signed, was that, there was a 2-year fixed amount of money that the tribes and the state had settled on. And that's a done deal. So,
That's probably the case in terms of the total. The other thing though, following on what you've done and what Roger is talking about, if I heard Melissa correctly, when she spoke at the last meeting, they put that budget breakdown together for the agreement as in their eyes as a suggestion. And knowing what we know now, what we need to do is give them that feedback so that the next agreement actually reflects what it is we have in place. And a request for any increases. Now, whether we get increase or not, they need to know what the budget breakdown looks like. And so that they can get that worked into the next agreement.
Now, I don't want to put any words in the state or the tribe's mouth, but I do believe that this next funding cycle is gonna be this same amount. And so.
It doesn't have to be the same breakdown though, I think.
Oh, yeah, we can move this around however you want. I happen to follow pretty close to what they had.
Yeah.
And if,
Well, I'm just suggesting they need to hear from us so that they know what it is.
I agree.
Yeah.
They've been, very interactive with trying to get us there, and I've been underwater on this project a little bit, know that, so, and see, it took a little doing to get us here, but I do believe we're much closer to having this bigger picture set up, but when you look at this is probably a lot of what our fiscal year 2025 budget is also going to be. So, and any increases that we would be looking at to try to ask for and try to share some justification for would affect our fiscal year 2026. So, you know, because of the staggered timeline. All right, so I have some other numbers down here, and I actually, you know, these were kind of a little rougher, but they, you know, and I took this information and went ahead and like modified the content a bit so we could have some, this is one of the printouts that you got. And this takes the detailed information that's down below. I did not print this out for you. But what we have here is we have the line items from the state and the tribes. And again, you know, the budget committee can redirect these numbers. So what you're seeing here is me following pretty close to the budget that we had. So for instance, you know, this $72,000, you know, I want to modify. I don't know that. You're gonna tell me what you want to see.
Well, but that's the whole thing. We don't know where we're at. We don't know how much we've spent. So until we know where we're at, then we can make
right,
adjustments.
we did get, since I put this together, we did get one other comment that went through, but you know, generally you're at need to have some more news.
Why?
So, and that's what this is supposed to help you with, okay? And that's what I'm trying to do. I do want to, you know, do some additional verification. And what you see on all this is that, you know, I really need to go through it another time to verify this number. But right here, you see we've got our accounting services, our IT services, legal services, website, and we've got the budget, you know, year to date here. Right? We've got actuals. We have the amount that's remaining, and we've got the variances.
I don't understand what's the difference between the two budgets.
So this is the
That's-
annual budget.
right.
This is the budget that's year to date, so up through July. So basically, if you took this accounting budget, if you took this accounting budget, you divided that by 12 and then multiplied it by 7. So you divide by 12 and get monthly amounts, and then multiply that monthly amount times 7, because there's 7 months up to July. Allegedly.
You know, I see what you're doing, but it's typically done as the, you know, you have the amount spent, the remaining, and then,
That is the amount spent right here.
right, I see
Okay.
that. So,
And then this is
So
the
we have-
amount remaining. And
The amount remaining is based on the 12,000?
so the amount remaining is 12,000 minus the actual spent, 5,823.
Okay, so back to,
You can see.
Roger's point, that second budget, there, is that even?
I used
it
it.
really doesn't
because-
have much bearing, it's just a monthly thing.
Well, it has bearing here, because, so if you budgeted 7,000 to be used by July, and then you know how much is remaining, you know, now that you have this. You know, oh, look, we're in the black still with this, you know, with the buffer 1,000, you know, now, all of a sudden you see one that's like red, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, that's when you start, that's like hey, whoa, we're over our budget on this one. And so that's why I think that that's a valuable piece of information, but again, we can take that out of there, if you don't want it.
Well, it's, all we're trying to do is, first of all, understand,
Yeah.
so we're not, don't take anything or add anything.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just try to understand, but when you put it together, so you have a clear picture in your mind about what each word means. We don't yet, so we're just trying to figure out, when you say budget and then budget, so it's the.
Sure.
You've given some description of that, so I think, let's just keep looking.
All right, so, you know, these general, contracts, you know, these are the big, you know, big standard contracts. We do have other contracts that, I've instead put them under the category of operations, right? You know, so, you know, cleaning services, contract services, but it's not really a line item, but it's still, you know, an important item to manage, right?
Well, it all needs to go in there, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, you see, you know, the water cooler, the domain, electricity, hiring fees. You know, some of these things are estimates, like I was like, well, I look at what we spent on hiring so far. We spent about, you know, $1,200 a year on hiring advertisements. You know, that kind of thing. Background checks would be in that category too. I worry that this number is actually a little bit low, but I'm still trying to work through things, right? Printer services, you know, this changes from time to time, depending on how much printing that we do. Propane bill, significant rent, you know, and, anyway, that security, supplies, just kind of a general, like roughly how much we spend, and you try to get to energy and water and sewer. Then we get down here in this other category, which you know, these operational details of like expenses that are not recurring, but are still important to us, right? And so, this is a typo, that's supposed to say furnishings, apologies, but these, I intend to break these out better. These are reimbursements, and reimbursements are typically for supplies, and they also include mileage though. And so we are shifting things towards the business credit cards that you know that we set up. But for a while it was easier, and for some things like these chairs, I did buy these under our Costco account, because, you know, our personal family Costco account, because we don't have a Costco account. I'm not sure we do anything, but maybe we will. I don't know. We got some safety stuff in here. Then, you know, some of these things are not realized yet. You know, like, oops, we want to spend this money here. It's, you know, a good chunk of change on QuickBooks. We think that that's a good idea. It's a discussion we can have in a minute. This, we did already spend this, and that's one of the updates that I have. I'll go ahead and update you now if that's all right. We bought out an XT, but we got to keep our phone number. Ron took care of this thing that was a real mess for us, the old phones. I'm telling you right now, the new phones are outstanding. We're very happy about that. And so when you look at that cost, just know that like that was well worth it to get out of that deal. And we are so happy about that transition.
So on that one, unfortunately, that's spent.
That's spent.
Now,
This,
you just said, did I hear you say that on the QuickBooks?
yeah,
One
this
there,
is not
that's not
spent,
spent.
and when I put this together the other day, that happened this morning. So we just spent that money this morning.
Right, but those are all listed under actual, and I thought actual was spent.
Yeah, so in this case,
So the QuickBooks one shouldn't be under actual,
right,
or am I reading it wrong?
in this one case for these operational details, all of this stuff, I have moved it into the actual, because I wanted to modify our total budget to say like, I think these things actually need to be in there and accounted for. But this is a bit of a catch-all, and these are the things that I think we should have some additional discussion about, like, you know, like the boo-boo kit.
I saw that too.
So,
An AED.
so let me ask it this way then. So if you've got some things in there that are actually spent, some things that you're proposing to spend, should those things proposing to spend be actually projected items?
Yeah, I think for this group of items that all right here, that probably would have been a better idea.
Yeah, why don't you just move those under budget then? Over to the far left for you.
It's harder to drive through the street than I think.
I think what we wanna know is what you want and what we've spent. We really need to know what we've spent. And if it's not been procured yet, then don't put it in there.
All right,
Water panels.
panels with these things right here.
Okay, so what was the $138,000 expenditure? Is that panels or office space?
This is, the combined budget for all of these periodic purchases. And so this is a giant merged cell
Oh, gotcha.
that relates with this, and the reason that it's like that is because it's just a big pile of one-time expenses, and I didn't wanna. Yeah, anyway,
Okay.
but kind of like when you guys were editing the other day, this was the last table that I got to, before I gave up, so, we can get it, a little bit better.
So is there a cell reference to that $138,000 then
Yeah,
from another spreadsheet?
yeah, and so that comes from, basically, if you take the total operations fund, and I'm gonna go back, over here to this comparison. So we have, this original budget set of items right here. Office setup, copy machine, rent, maintenance, office travel, so forth. We have all those, just put them all in a giant pile, okay? For the purposes of this budget, kept these other things separated out. I took all that and put it into a giant, pile. And then what I did with that is I went down and I estimated these, try to get these recurring expenses as dialed in as possible. Then took the pile of operational funds, subtracted the total recurring funds from that to end up with this value.
But you should have either credit card receipts or check stubs or something that you can relate that back to. Do you?
For
For that
each
amount of
the
money,
things that
for
have
that
been
amount of money
purchased?
that's been spent, yeah.
For these, yes,
No, for that 138,000.
That's just the budget.
this is the budgeted amount,
Okay.
so
So what's spent
what we
is,
have here is we have a bank account that has that money in it.
Okay, so you spot, so where is it that you show you bought all this stuff?
That's when it's in the actual, and so, we have receipts for all this stuff, and those receipts. When we go back over. I'll show you the. Excuse me. Oh, that was. So what we did is here is we took all of the 2024 amounts, right? This is after I put them into categories. Then built pivot tables. So that we could then, glean from the pivot table the different categorical amounts. But all of these things, like the furnishings, that's when we had a line item amount that was designated as furnishing right here. These are your office chairs.
Okay.
Okay, and so this was a reimbursement, right? But I know what it was. We have the receipt for it. That receipt's, archived and everything. So it's under operations. It's under furnishings. And then, and all that will cross-reference back. Now, can we do better than we have in the past? Absolutely. We're on a mission to do that right now. Ron is part of that mission, and so she's helping out extraordinarily so far. And we're happy about that. But this hopefully gets it how these numbers came to be. And so now the exciting news is that there's nothing else underneath this spreadsheet. But I'm gonna go back up here and you'll see, of course, this goes all the way over, but we're at it. This was the year-to-date calculations for where we're at. And I did understand that the board wanted to see stuff like that monthly interval so that you can say, what's our budget? What have we spent? What's we making? How off are we? Right? So that's what I kind of built things headed that direction. So now here we have this information in the more consolidated form, right? I still have these broken out as contracts, but they're also summarized, right here under all contracts. And then what we see, that the addition of all those right there brings you to the total budget, right? And then this is the total budget through July. And then that helps us to see where we're at, what's remaining. And then take this information, we go over over here. And what you see, these numbers, these are the actual bank account values, okay? And so, here's our combined, set of monies, and this amount here includes appropriations, it includes interest, it includes application fees, right? And then, we've got this, we try to pull out this projected remaining budget amount, right? And then that leaves us with this balance. And this balance is important, to understand, that includes that one-time $185,000 amount also that was budgeted there. So we, if we spend the full budgeted amount, we will be dipping into that. This amount here does not have a car in it yet. That's I think one of our potential large expenses. There's other, I have some other proposed things that you can spend some money on that we can talk about. But I'm hoping that this brings you a little closer to
I think you're getting closer, but you're not quite there yet.
that, and it's why it all says draft on it for sure.
Okay, so before we jump into some more discussion. So I was going to ask, is there one table that you would point to, you would say, all right, you lay that in front of us on a monthly basis, this is the one we need to look at, is this it?
This is it,
Okay,
potentially, or we change this.
no, I get that.
Yeah,
So the appropriations, what is that?
so this is our money market account. This is our checking,
Okay,
and these two added together are all of our accounts.
okay, and what was at the start of the year, so we're in the second year of the agreement? So we've got an agreement, so I'd like to see somehow the numbers from the agreement reflected so that we know where it goes right back to the beginning. So the agreement gives us half from the state, half from the tribe, and there's a total there. What is that and where does that show here?
Sure, okay, so the total that you're talking about, there's this total, and then there's this total, it's 1,126.51. Okay, and that number is right here. 1,126.51. That's your total budget. Now, I've tried to make the caveats about the 185. Just to remember that's kind of this extra set aside money, but
The one time.
Yeah,
And I think we could break the one-time one out and, I mean, show how that was expended, and then I think the rest of it is gonna be, really focus on what the other funding is that comes from the state and the tribe.
I think you gotta put, you gotta include that one-time funding in your 2024 budget, because that was an appropriation made. And what you do with it at the end of the year, whether you carry it over or not, it's discretionary money, I guess you could call it if you want to, but otherwise it's not, your books aren't gonna balance if you don't do that for 2024. But anyway, I think you're getting there. Like I said, I think Georgia and I would probably like to meet with you and go over some more of this in more detail.
I think it'd be helpful. So given that, Georgia and Roger, you guys did a little bit of exploring and discussing, and I think you had some conversations with our accounting firm that maybe, I'm assuming some of that you want to share today.
Sure, I'd be
So
happy to.
between the two of you, either whoever wants to, however you want to break it up, if you want to kind of, if you guys have things to talk about now, it'd be a good time to get the board up to speed.
Do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, after the last meeting, we understood that we have to get this budget out for the public to see. We're required to do that. And this has been a heavy lift. So I contacted Shalleck and Davis and just asked a very basic question. And I spoke to Marie Fong, who has been doing some of the work for this office. And I asked her just one question. Could Shalleck and Davis prepare a budget for the OE? Could they take over that responsibility or help do that lift? And she said, no, that is not something they could do. And that's really the only thing I asked. Then we met, Rhonda, Ethan and I met with a QuickBooks representative, and they did a really excellent job of unpacking what QuickBooks could offer in terms of support. And you guys had, Rhonda, you guys had excellent questions to ask of QuickBooks. And I was very satisfied with their answers. The one little hiccup is they do appear to have some security concerns. I'm sure they're working on those. I didn't pursue that any further because I figured you guys would be workshopping that. But given that could be resolved, that would be a good way to go. Now, during that meeting, Ethan brought up a concern that, you correct me if I don't represent this correctly, but there was a concern that the data that we've given to Shalleck and Davis cannot be gotten back. That there's a proprietary issue with the software, the QuickBooks software, that they cannot give an electronic copy of our budget data back to the office. Did I say that correctly?
you said it correct, and you should, it is actually even specifically mentioned in the contract the board implemented with Shalleck and Davis.
So I contacted Krista Shalleck last week. I have to look back and get the dates, or was it yesterday? It was last week. Okay. This week is blurring. And I just asked her that question. I was like, okay, this was interesting. This is where this gets a little confusing for me, and it might require some additional follow-up. I asked Krista if her office, if Shalleck and Davis could do a budget for the OE, and she said yes, that they could, if they had the appropriations amount and the expenditure categories, they could prepare a budget and budget reports for us. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I asked the follow-up question, so I've only got one more for you. Can you give us an electronic copy of our budget data? And she said, no, that was a proprietary licensing issue, but they could easily generate every report that would be needed and share those electronically. So I don't know what that caveat is between sharing some original form of the data versus a final produced report. But that appears to be where the speed bump is. And I didn't pursue it any further. So I hope that's helpful.
So I'm saying, the first person you talked to said they could not, and the second person you talked to said they could.
Right, and so Krista Shalek is the primary owner now in Shalek and Davis, so I talked to the head honcho basically, and Marie Fong does payroll. And so I don't know if I asked the question incorrectly and got two different answers, or if this is an internal thing they need to get straightened out. But yes, one employee said, no, we can't do it, and the other one said, oh, sure, no problem. So I just muddied the waters there, didn't I? Didn't help you at all.
Well, no, I think it deserves more follow-up now, right? And I think Ethan wanted to meet with you, with us, so let's do that and maybe do some more follow-up, because if they can provide, even if they can just do the reports and provide us with that, does that help us? If it does, why not explore that? I mean, that would be my off-the-cuff thinking here.
Yeah, and I guess I should have qualified all of that with the statement of, all of this was done to try to figure out a way to support staff, to help you out. Is there a way to reduce some of the lift? Because this is a ton of work. And I guess I don't have a clear answer yet. Oh,
You got also some other interesting information, because when we talked to QuickBooks, they said that having somebody retain the QuickBooks output files, like they're suggesting, violates the QuickBooks ethics rules. And that if we engage with QuickBooks, they will request that information on our behalf.
that's right.
And to me, that is kind of significant information.
Yeah, and what I'm wondering, well, I guess we'll find out, and whether it matters or not, is maybe there's some additional programming or software they have that is proprietary that's melded with their QuickBooks that causes that. That's the only thing I can think. Otherwise, yeah, let's explore it, because it's, I want to get us to the point where we're getting what we need, and it helps us, it helps you, and hopefully even takes some of the tedium out of this for you, because that's a lot of work.
Well, so if we have this QuickBooks software, it will take the tedium out.
Yeah,
And then we would have a little better control over our own books. Yeah, that is a kind of part of the reason that you guys are frustrated with me, is because getting this information has been difficult. I don't really want to me, solving that situation where we don't have a hard time getting to the information would be a smarter way to go. Because it wasn't actually the tables, the spreadsheets, it took me a long time. It was that operation of listing the expenses and the operation data. That is what took me a long time to get and to put it together. So that, I think that's something to think about. The other thing about the question with QuickBooks is that I do want to make that decision before the end of the month, because we're getting the sweet deal on QuickBooks if we buy it right now. They happen to have 75% off for us, and we think that would give us a chance to really kick the tires on that thing and check it out without.
And I should add, when I spoke to Marie Fong, that was her recommendation as well, was for the OE to be doing this in-house. she said that pretty emphatically, that she felt the best thing for the office would be to do its own budget reporting and payroll and set it up via QuickBooks. She thought that would be an expedient solution. So
we went with an accounting firm. And I think we thought that was a good idea. It was a good idea for what we needed. You know, maybe it's changing. I think having an accounting firm involved is important. I think they're gonna have a role. So I think about move for us moving to something like QuickBooks do. I don't know what that means from a staffing standpoint then. Because I keep thinking, you know, having accounting specialists working on this is helpful. If we go to QuickBooks, do we need to also back that up with an accounting person or a business person to actually operate that for us? I don't know how that works.
It is odd that the contract with the accounting firm really in the specifics specifically said that they would not actually do accounting for us. It was just the payroll. And so if we were gonna do something, I would really want to look at the contract of what the forward going, what we're gonna do kind of thing is, because I don't want, like I said, so I want to avoid this, the past issue that we got into and have better access to stuff. It certainly makes some sufficient sense that the route that went forward would have been the easy route, and it turned out to, you know, be different than what one would expect.
And
Right.
I think talking, pardon, Marie, her specialty is payroll, it's not budgets. And they've had some staff issues there as well. My only thought when you said that, Ethan, is maybe the next round of conversation should be at a higher level and maybe speak to Krista directly and see if you get a different answer there. Have you had a chance to talk to her at all?
No, that
Okay.
transition is pretty recent.
It is.
So
Yeah.
you know, I did have that same discussion previously,
Gotcha.
and I got nowhere.
Gotcha.
So.
So I'm wondering, I don't know how much of this we want to share with them. I don't think we want to give this to them, but I'm wondering if maybe the three of you were actually to meet with her
Okay.
with this information and sit down and say, you know, this, we're just trying to solve this problem. What can you do and how, what's the best way to do this? And we ends up that everyone agrees we should go with QuickBooks, and we probably better move on it. But let's see, I mean, we're already paying them, so if, what, you know, how would that work? Can we find a solution there working with them or not?
And I
I-
like that. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I do think we should retain that service through the remainder of this fiscal year. You know.
Yeah.
But I think that would be a time that we could work on our pivot in a steady fashion. You know, towards something different. So not cut out the legs from the stool abruptly. But-
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that at
Okay.
all myself either. I'm just suggesting let's figure out what the appropriate next steps are and what are options, what can we make work? Is it gonna work best to work with them? Is it gonna work best to do something else, like just go with QuickBooks? Is there another option? I don't know.
Well, I think you brought up a really important point, Clayton, and you know, initially, when I contacted them, it was a very simple question. Can you help us get a budget? You know, just something we can quick review, so it wouldn't be such a heavy lift for you. And bearing your good thoughts in mind, it is great to have an accounting firm as kind of an intermediary for so many reasons. And that's another layer we need to explore, isn't it? So, okay.
Well, not, to put too fine a point on it, but at some point, either we or the state and or tribe are gonna say, gee, should we do an audit?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And while everyone I've talked to from the state side and the tribal side have always said, well, no, don't need to have an audit. That, I'm not, I mean, they're not gonna require it, but I do know that the state does annual audits, tribe does annual audits. I just think we need to be thinking about that because at some point it's gonna happen. It's gonna, someone's gonna, you know, force the issue. So we should keep that in the back of our mind, and while we're preparing, you know, getting ourselves in a position to do whatever we're gonna do here, that we should also keep moving that forward so we eventually have something in place so that maybe we want to do it ourselves and just do an internal auditing and to try to assure ourselves that we're doing all the right things. So,
I am fairly convinced that if we start doing payroll internally, that will make things a lot easier. And the reason is because the QuickBooks setup for payroll will replace what we currently do, which is a different spreadsheet that has everybody's timesheets that tracks PTO, benefits, everything else. And so we haven't really kept track of it in two different places. We can consolidate that, and then everybody can just operate through the portal. And it's not like we're building something from scratch. This is
Pre-built.
this is something people use, right?
yeah, and apparently the accounting firm even uses it. So it's something that, I mean, I hear a lot about it, but I've never used it, so. And then maybe we're talking about figuring out what steps we want to take, where we want to go, and then there's a transition working with them. And maybe we get to the point where they're actually the ones we contract to do auditing. So that we've got that assistance built in somehow. I just thinking out loud here, guys, so. Anything more on the budget stuff?
I'd just like to say I appreciate the work that Roger and Georgia and Ethan have done on this. Is there a deadline on that 75% off?
Yes, I appreciate you coming back to that, and that will be the end of the month, which means I'm really gonna try to talk you into taking action. And I am trying to talk you into letting me spend money on QuickBooks.
So with QuickBooks, you know, it's really critical on how you code everything in, all your checks and whatnot. So with what you've done to date, are you just tracking them in Excel then, every check that you write, or how? And every expense, or how are you tracking?
It is a mishmash of items. We have checks that I can track through the bank. We have the QuickBooks stuff, which is difficult, and I rely on PDF reports from the accounting services, which then is very time consuming to have to go back and basically you're paying me to do data entry, you know, whenever I manage those reports that they come in. Some of the stuff we did is just a scan of the bank statement with, you know, like lines drawn through things that are cleared. And I mean, we need to, I would like to eliminate that by doing exactly what we're talking about. Dialing QuickBooks in, getting our categories in a firm designated fashion, you know, that is consistently applied.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm going back to that too, to reconcile what you've got here, you know, how do you reconcile that? That goes back to the audit there, so.
So part of what we could get from QuickBooks is that they will actually help us, bring the information from the past back into, like, for 2023, they'll help us pull all that in and get it, you know, groomed, using their QuickBooks professionals.
Have you worked with QuickBooks, or anybody else on your staff worked with QuickBooks?
We have one staff member who's got some experience with QuickBooks on the desktop version. We have another member of the staff who currently runs, business on QuickBooks. I have not used QuickBooks before. This is a little different because QuickBooks is moving, the reason that there's a bargain is that they're transitioning out of the desktop environment to the online environment, so that your information is cloud stored, which is where all the rest of our information is stored right now anyway. That's kind of where. So, but to answer you, like, we do not have like a, QuickBooks expert, and we do think that by getting the program,
Who's worked with it?
one,
Okay,
Kathy,
Well,
Christie has some.
I get the idea of wanting to get something if it's good deal. If we were ready to say, let's pull the trigger and let's get quicker, let's just do that. If you all think we're ready, I mean, you guys tell me, but it sounds like we need to do a little more exploring here, and I'm not sure we're gonna get that done in time unless we want to authorize the purchase of it, pending a quick meeting that you guys could have together with the accounting firm and then make a final decision on it. I'm just trying to figure out how you want to approach this. I hate to miss out on a good deal too, but I also don't want to rush our decision just because there's a good deal on the table.
Yeah.
Want to make the right decision, do it well. And maybe that is it. I just don't know.
well, maybe Rhonda, or maybe Georgia and I and Ethan and maybe Rhonda too, could go meet with, what's the name? Krista next week, early next week or something. And then we could meet also and go over this in more detail at the same time.
And would the board be willing to give pre-approval to moving forward with QuickBooks? Should that be the recommendation? Or do you want to wait?
What are the costs again? Ethan?
The program itself is $1,718. I think we should just do that, period. The $2,500 is if we want to pay QuickBooks to help us. Take all of our past information and get it all set up.
So what's the discount on the software or the service?
The top number is 1718 is 75% off. That's an annual fee.
So the bottom number doesn't change regardless. 2,500?
Is that, do I have that right?
So the $2,500 is per, bringing 2023 and 2024 up in current in QuickBooks. They will not go back to 2022, you have to manually input that. The $1,700 is the annual plus the membership subscription fee for the $10 per employee per month. So that's a combination of QuickBooks, bookkeeping, and also payroll services, both at the $1,700 annual, and it's 75% off their online version right now.
So the $2,500, they're going to,
The
how are they
$2,500,
gonna import that?
what was that?
Are they gonna import the existing?
They're gonna attempt to import the existing, by contacting the CPA as a pro user of QuickBooks, and if that doesn't work, they will assist us in manually entering it in and categorizing everything audited 2023 and 2024 to get us up and current and running. And that's the cost of them doing it. They actually, the online version is certified bookkeeper supported. Their payroll function is also certified bookkeeper supported, so it's not necessarily what we're running. We'll be doing more of the data entry portion. They oversee the function of the payroll.
And if I've got the numbers right in my head, that total amount is still less than what we're paying on our annual contract
Right.
to Shallick and Davis. you know, my today feeling about this is it's a bargain to get into it this year at that price and get the last 2 years brought up to date. It's also a great way to go ahead and reduce our costs on running the monthly payroll. That could easily be done in-house. What, to me, the big question we don't have yet that would come from that meeting is what services can Shalleck and Davis provide and at what cost in producing the budget? And we just don't know that yet.
Mr. Chairman, I need to step out for a
Yeah,
second.
and
So I think to sum up, it would make sense to pre-approve the purchase because it's still cheaper than what we're paying to just execute payroll. And we're not getting a budget from them at that price either.
so approve it today pending a meeting with them and a final decision.
Just to double check on something, Rhonda,
Yes,
do we have to buy the $2,500 at the same time?
no, that's not,
That can be an optional separate,
yes, and it's not gonna be needed if we can import,
all right,
but it was recommended to, at the base,
Yeah.
$500 to have them audit what has been done.
But there's really not gonna be that much they're gonna import, because all they've been doing is payroll anyway.
Right.
So you've gotta still go back and manually import all the costs today.
Not if they can gain access to our files, they'll be able to bring us back from 2022 forward. And that, so there's two different functions that we rolled into that 1,700.
Why don't you come on up and,
Yeah.
thank you.
So we have two different functions in that $1,700. We have the bookkeeping function, which is our operating expenses and our costs and such. And then we also have the payroll function that is being rolled into that $1,700. And so the $2,500 is to perform an audit and bring our books up to date. And that they will not do 2022 to assist us. They will do 2023 and 24 if we cannot gain access to our already entered QuickBooks material from the CPA.
But what the CPA has is pretty limited anyways.
The CPA has had a copy of all of our transactions from the very beginning that they were contracted. And so they have generated that all in QuickBooks. They're just not willing to give it back to us.
All of our transactions, you mean everything that we've purchased?
Everything that all the bank statements, they get a copy of that, all of our payroll, all of our bookkeeping functions, they've had that since the very inception of them being on board.
Okay,
Which they should share it back to us.
yeah,
Technically, it's our information,
Correct.
but they're not willing to, and I don't know why. And as a pro user, QuickBooks is willing to get involved and say, hey, you guys need to do this, you're in violation of our ethics. So there's still that first route, but the second route is the $2,500 if we need help to try to help with the data entry of taking our files, breaking them apart and doing it from the very beginning. It needs to be done. We need to absolutely do this. We should be able to jump in here and produce a financial report before every meeting and hand it to you guys in the format you want to see. We've had a lot of people, handling this, and so there's a lot of different coding happening, and so it needs to kind of be broke apart so we can get it all coded the same.
I guess the one thing to add, I was just running some numbers. So if you look at the cost for QuickBooks next year in 2025, even with the additional 75% cost, it's still cheaper than our annual contract.
Yes.
With Shalleck and Davis. So it really makes sense to go that route. To what degree we use it, we have to decide.
and it automates the tax function. That
Yes.
we need to do for payroll taxes,
Yeah.
so like, it's the package. The whole package is right there. We'll have to do the things that we'll have to wrangle a little bit will be the communication and the work with the health benefits and with the retirement services. But, then we gotta maintain our relationship with the Montana Unemployment Insurance folks too. But I think that the amount of time that I spend on those, working through somebody else, actually, this would be a time saver. So.
And it would bring to the online, I believe we can have up to 10 users, and so if there's different user parameters we could set up, so board members could probably take a look at it and see what the status is too. So we have that option also, just like, you know, permissions and stuff, so there's a little bit more oversight than what you think of a desktop version that would be sitting here that we would control. We would actually have quite a bit of oversight. So.
And the 2,500 is a one-time cost for
Yes.
23, 24.
Yes, it's just to help us get it going, because I can technically do it, but then my time is gonna be designated to getting us up and going, and data entry is very time consuming, and I'm willing, but it's just how you guys want to direct my time. You're welcome.
Thank you. So, how do you want to phrase your motion?
All right, I'll raise my motion. I think we should continue this so we get a budget in front of us as soon as possible. But yet I can see if we get that QuickBooks and then Rhonda can go back to 2023 and 2024, that'll serve as a bit of an audit on ourselves. So that would be beneficial. So I guess I'll make a motion that we meet early next week with Shallot and Davis, and based on the results of that meeting, we have tentative approval to purchase QuickBooks and the $2,500 fee to mesh or import all the 2023 and 2024 data.
Motion by Roger,
I'll second.
second by Georgia. A long motion, long second. We'll go around. Georgia? Yes, yes.
We need public comment.
Oh, darn.
I think this is administerial, so like, I mean, this is really just a budget item and not, you know, and the reason you're seeing it is because it just peaks its head right over $3,000.
Let's reschedule that.
I'm wide open.
Hey, are we good without public comment?
I have no.
I wanted to double check on the resolutions we had.
Let's hit pause on the vote. We have a motion and second on the floor. Are there any comments?
Public comments,
Any public comments?
if it would be acceptable to the board, but you comment on the current budget.
If you have a comment, step up, give us your name, rank and serial number and your comment.
Dear board, my name is Nathan Wolstagel. I'm a current graduate student at Social Community College and incoming PhD student at Penn State University. Thank you for allowing me to come today to the board meeting. In my career in the private sector, I managed a $250 million budget alongside a financial team for L'Oreal, beauty conglomerate, fluctuating $12 million budget for Bass Pro and Cabela's, $570,000 budget for backcountry hunters and anglers. I have an NDA with Capital Blue Cross for financial analysis and an NDA with Bass Pro and Cabela's. Just some suggestions off your budget. I know this is still new in development, and I'm saying this out of my respect for all of you and the fact that you serve the public with over a $1 million budget annually. So please do not take these comments as, you know, abrasive or, you know, just trying to provide constructive feedback. Within your budget, you have fixed costs and variable costs lumped together on certain line items. That is not acceptable financial practice. Those costs must be separated. Especially for public facing entity. I don't know if you face any external audits or any internal audits, but that will be flagged, absolutely.
Can you specifically give us a reference on a fixed cost versus a?
So a fixed cost would be salary, like that's annually set, that is not going to fluctuate. Fixed costs like salary should be forecasted quarterly and not on a monthly basis. There's no fluctuation. So there's no need to dive in depth on a monthly basis on salary.
Yeah, it's a set thing.
Yeah, your variable costs, you know, different materials, miscellaneous items, printing, items that are going to fluctuate, that should be forecasted on a monthly basis, whereas all your fixed costs, that's on a quarterly basis. That is standard practice in the private sector and for many public serving entities. My ultimate suggestion is I've used QuickBooks in the past for a few businesses I've owned. I found their customer service to be lackluster at times. So Georgia's suggestion to partnering with an outside accounting firm, I would actually recommend it. I know the cost is going to be higher and it's something everyone's going to have to consider, but you get way better service and way more accurate books, in my honest opinion. there's any other questions the board has for me, I'm happy to answer them.
No, thank you for your
Thank you.
comments.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody online?
If anyone online would like to make public comment, raise your hand and we will like. I'm seeing no public comment.
All right, we had a motion, we had a second. Do you still stand by your motion? Stand by your second?
Yes.
Okay. In favor, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Georgia?
Yes.
Yes.
8-9 Georgia.
Let me, yes, all right. So hopefully
For Avatar.
our recorder captured the long motion. But you have it, so we'll have a meeting. And then following that, based on your recommendation, we can move forward with books, if that's what you choose.
So I'm open Monday, Tuesday morning, I have a dentist appointment from 8:30 to 9:30. I'm open Wednesday. So I could be down in Polson probably by Tuesday. I guess it depends upon what Georgia can set up.
Well, we could probably do this over the phone too.
Oh, I think it's good to do it.
Okay.
Because we want to meet with Ethan anyways on this
Plus,
whole
you
budget.
probably want to be able to show them some of this information.
Yeah.
The only conflict I have is next Tuesday at 10. I have a meeting at SKC on a class I'm teaching, but Monday's wide open. We need to see if Krista's available
Or
and Rhonda.
Rhonda.
I had an 11 a.m. meeting that's summer on with cookbooks, if you guys want to have any further comments, and other than that, my schedule is completely open.
So would you like me to call? Yeah, Ethan, are you available on Monday?
Monday's a good day for me. The only day I'm not available is Wednesday. And she didn't talk about Wednesday yet, so. But I mean, it's what I like later.
That one's open. Is your Wednesday's open too?
Yeah, Wednesdays open.
Do you want me to call
Tuesday,
Krista
I could
tomorrow?
do Tuesday afternoon too.
Well,
I do anytime Tuesday. Tuesday's a good one for me.
Rhonda's Tuesday. good?
so when you say end of the month, so that is the end of the month. So if we don't pull the trigger by then,
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
Oh,
out.
we gotta do it Monday then.
Monday or Tuesday.
Monday or Tuesday. Okay. Why don't I call tomorrow and see if I can set up a time?
Okay.
And then I'll email everybody.
Okay,
Okay.
I gotta be at 8:05.
And, yep, so there are, so I'm gonna move on off the budget, so thank you all for that. So we've got, so Ethan, under, this item, we've got, GSA update and phone updates. Can you do those quickly? And I think we've got folks that need to be out here.
sure, is already done. Yay, go Rhonda, thank you. The GSA update is that we are GSA eligible. So we've jumped through the hoops and we'll tell you more about that as things develop. Just want to give you an update that we jumped through the application process, and no surprise that we're eligible to do things through them that could, depending on what we land on, include the vehicle. If that's an option we want to pursue, we'll probably do some cost comparisons between GSA vehicle and outside source.
All right, with that, I know there's some folks that,
And sorry.
go ahead.
Right, the one other thing I wanted to mention is that I just need to I need to let the new staff know when they can sign up for retirement benefits. And I sent you guys an email about that item previously, and I was hoping that we could just track what the health insurance schedule is, which is like after you work there a month and you can sign up the following month. And that would help for the budget realization, so that potentially all in the same pay period, those two benefits would occur, but
What does our personnel policy say?
it's never, it was never, we didn't make it through that.
We haven't gotten there yet. So the question that you're asking though, does that require board action?
I think if you just told me to track that and add it to the personnel policy so that you can eventually, you know, take formal action on it, that would be sufficient.
Well, every personnel policy thing we've reviewed and approved, so I disagree with you on that.
Okay.
I mean, we voted on all of those things. So. As we've moved along on those.
That we have approved some personnel policy that have we finished them?
No, we are a long ways from finishing them.
Yeah, so your question about, so repeat your question.
I was hoping that the board would allow me to just move forward on implementing, you have a resolution about providing retirement and the amount and with who, and that's all set. One thing that is pending is like, when can a new employee actually sign up? And so I was hoping you would just direct me to track what happens with our health insurance. And that we can let the new employees just go ahead and sign up after they've worked here for a full month, they can sign up for the following month.
That's what we do with health insurance?
Yep, and that was not written in the personnel policy, that was, you know, enacted with the health.
So with the retirement, I thought we had something in there about that, because don't we have a vesting period and other things?
The retirement people refused to enact a vesting period for our retirement, and they said, no, since it's a fund type, you know, arrangement, that they do not manage vesting. And if we were gonna do vesting anyway, we'd have to go through kind of an elaborate setup where you set up a trust to hold the money separately in status, as opposed to, you know, just calling it a benefit. Moving on.
So the question is, do we want to provide a consensus to allow allow Ethan what he is asking? My question, going back to insurance, is why did we require a month wait? I don't remember that.
I was not part of that setup with Judy at the insurance place, but she's the one who told us that's the day.
That was standard protocol.
Okay, so my personal thought would regardless of the insurance, was that if somebody comes on, if they want to sign up for retirement, they should be able to do it right away. But if you all want to concede and have consensus to wait a month, then we can do this by consensus and then take action on it. After we get it on the agenda and have some discussion and approve it. Thoughts?
So you sent out a memo on this?
An email.
Yes,
No.
when? I haven't seen it.
Probably did. I think I remember seeing something on, I don't know that I studied it, but
Yeah,
yes.
I didn't study it.
Just a suggestion too, when reviewing the email, would be to also review the resolution number 3, which pertains to the retirement requirements that the board sign into resolution. Which would probably be the simplest way to address this, would be to revise the resolution.
To include that,
Yes,
you're saying,
yes,
but when we take the action. So
Yes.
if we didn't do that today, could we by consensus, say, go ahead with waiting a month? Or do
no, this needs to be on the agenda
Yeah.
for board action.
so let's get it on the
Does
agenda.
the resolution for the retirement say that there's a waiting period?
What it says about vesting is immediate upon an employee establishing a FRWMB account and contributing, and employee eligibility to initiate a FRWMB account are further defined in the OE personal policy.
Which is why I think we should just put it in the personnel policies to avoid having to go through modifying a resolution.
Either one's gonna require first action and we don't have
Right.
that in front of us, so. Add it to the next agenda.
Sorry. Maybe to speak.
Okay.
All right, final comments.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Roger.
I just, would like to see us continue to prioritize the municipal permit and change thing, and that's Payla's offered, Attila's available, so maybe you want, for the next meeting, you want to think about forming a little group to start in on that?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, and I didn't want to interrupt. Did you have any final comments?
Nope, I don't have any final comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Nope.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion. Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks.
All right, guys.
Oh, next meeting date, yeah.
Next meeting date, I guess we can still talk about that. We're all still here.
We need to reopen.
What's up?
I'm still losing my mind.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we need to reopen the record if we're gonna be determining another meeting date.
She looks up. That was where you did. Yeah.
Do we,
How about this? I'll
we-
solicit your dates over email later, and then we'll announce the meeting after we figure out everybody's calendar days.
our meeting dates, I mean, if why do we need to reopen the records? Can we just discuss a meeting date and agree and then advertise that?
That's fine, it was on the agenda, that's why.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I don't know how to reopen it, so, suggestion to reopen the record to settle a meeting, date for the next meeting, Are we still recording?
We are.
We haven't stopped recording,
I think all we need is a motion to reopen the record.
so we had already adjourned, so I need a motion to reopen the record.
I'll make a motion to
Motion by
reopen.
Roger, reopen the record.
I'll second it.
Second by George, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay, so we were on and off again, back on. We are discussing, the next meeting date.
Well, as it stands now, I'm unavailable the weekend, 12th.
I am too.
So the week of the fifth, how about the week of the fifth? So.
Okay.
Suggest a day,
I won't be here.
At all.
The eighth, if you wanna do that.
Oh,
one,
that's right.
Thursday. We're short staffed Monday through Wednesday on the week of the fifth.
so the suggestion is looking at the eighth, so Georgia, you're not available?
Let me text my husband real quick and see if he will disclose what my surprise is that week.
I just say, are we gonna be busy on the eighth?
I'll do that right now. Okay, let's see what I can find out.
Okay.
About the 7th or the 9th.
Well, Ethan is just saying that they're short staffed. Thursday is a better day for staffing. Is all. You want to just call him up and put him on a speakerphone?
He would love that, yeah. He would really love it if I did that, so.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Would you like to also set one for the week of the 19th? Regardless. Maybe on the 21st, Wednesday?
August 21.
So,
Off
offer all weekend, right, so everybody anniversaries.
Unavailable.
I'm available that week.
First, I'm available.
Yeah.
21st, did you say you are?
It's not available on the first.
Okay. Other than that, we can, are you available anytime that week?
What's that?
Are you available anytime that week?
Well, I'm planning on vacation that week, so I won't be available that whole week.
Okay. You're okay if we meet on the 21st?
Oh, sure.
Okay. All right.
If things change, I'll let you know.
Okay.
I'm just gonna call him. Hey, do we have any plans for August 8th? We're trying to come up with our next meeting for the board, and I don't know if the 8th is open. Okay, we're good on the 8th. Perfect. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
No problem.
So next tentative dates are August 8th and August 21. All good?
All good. That's great. Mr. Chairman, board members, just for, since we've got the full house, potentially on the 8th, you want to plan to move address the domestic allowance sections? Or do you have some other topics you want to handle?
Was that the priority item you were talking about?
No, that was the getting the next set of permits and changes going on,
Okay, domestic allowance, yeah, I mean,
but we need to finish that up.
yep. Sure, do it.
Okay, I just, we'll see what kind of advance. I was thinking more for the permits and changes to working group situation. Is that okay? That you'd be on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay,
And probably Haley, so we could talk about growing cities doctrine, right? Thank you.
From the cities.
Okay, do you have any other topics you want to handle on the 8th, so we can try to prepare?
I can't think of any right now.
Okay,
whatever,
I guess
whatever
the
priority policy
budget.
stuff you have,
all right.
Budget.
policy
Yep.
stuff you have.
We'll have the
You
budget.
got the budget there.
Hopefully,
Yes, sir.
hopefully we'll see. Motion to adjourn.
I'm not gonna make it.
I move that we adjourn.
Motion by, and second by George, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned for the second time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
That means we get 600, right?